to call this meeting to order.
She's splitting hairs up.
Roll call.
That's 1,000. Okay.
All the charter commissioners are present.
Let's scratch some. What we got?
We have the minutes of the meeting of June, March 6th and March 8th before you. I know you haven't had much opportunity to review them. You're going to have to get a runner or something to get them out and Wednesday. It's almost unreal in the mail. I did try to call most everybody, tell them it's available at the bank, but that's the problem also. So,
You want to round it up?
your desires on approval of the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, to make a suggestion, because I think this is going to be a perhaps continuing problem even if we have an office, why not see that they're available to the commission, that we move the next week for their approval? And I would suggest too that you might wish to, that we put this item off until next week possibly, and then include the minutes of February 20th and 27th. Approve, say, the 4 sets, and then from this meeting we would put off till the following. Might be a way to handle it.
I agree. Is that the consensus of the commission?
Yes.
Sounds as good as any.
Any objections? So ordered. We have no appearance requests that none have been received by me. However, we had something tragic happen today, and I would like to give Lisa Parker a moment or so.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a minute to ask if we could tribute to Gene Guest, and he was, well, I think that he was a very great person and gave everybody a lot of help, and I would just ask that we take a moment and think of it.
Gene, as you all know, passed away today. And he is a man who devoted much time and much effort and energy to governmental functions of this state and this city. I think if we make official note in the records of our regret at his passing, and I would, when we have a secretary, ask that if it's agreeable with the commission, that letter know that still with his wife.
Agreed.
Now to go on. Special committee reports. Rules Committee, Arlis Zerkowski. Report on revisions.
Mr. Chairman, you recall the rules of procedure as adopted by the Commission contain an item in Article 2, Item 5, stating that all meetings of the Commission shall be open to the public at all times. There's been some discussion as to the possibility that there might be certain times when it would be necessary under rather extreme circumstances perhaps to have an executive session. We have a bit of a conflict. I have talked this over with Rick Garnett. Section 29 of the Unification Act does state, and it's exactly as it is in our bylaws, that all meetings of the Commission shall be open to the public. Title 44 does have a section, and we can give the actual reference here and read it if you think it's appropriate, is in conflict with that, and it goes into some detail as to all meetings of administrative bodies of the state or any of the political subdivisions shall be open except in some rather specific conditions, such as matters that would adversely affect the finances of the political body, tend to injure the reputation of persons or characters, And what was the reference, Rick, regarding matters of law and charter?
Yes, matters which by law, municipal charter, or ordinance are required to be confidential.
Right. Those are the three exceptions. And I would like to put out to you as a possible, I won't move to do this because I think we need a little discussion, but instead of having all meetings of the commission shall be open to the public, that we would consider substitution and state that meetings of the commission will be open to the public under the terms and conditions as specified in state law. And in other words, this would allow us some discretion. Rick could speak to the legality of this, but it does seem the two are in conflict. I think one thing that the commission should be cognizant of, that they would use this only under extreme circumstances, that any action that, if it were necessary, say to have an executive session, that official action would be taken before the public. And this seems to then give us a little bit of leeway if we run into, and we've cited some of the examples where we really might do a disservice to the people or to someone if the matter were conducted in the open. Would you like to hear any comment from the attorney?
I think ours has outlined the situation pretty completely. We do have an apparent conflict between the provision on agency meetings contained in the Alaska Administrative Procedures Act and the provision contained directly in the unification statute. Some research into the legislative history on the unification bill itself might indicate that they weren't really thinking about it, but they contemplated that the special exceptions in the APA would continue. But of course we can't say that with any real confidence right now. And of course even under the APA in 1972 there was an amendment which was really a statement of legislative policy that executive sessions would be used very rarely in extreme circumstances. So I think it would be wise to respect that attitude. If we feel that there are some subjects which would represent a clear and present danger, you might say, of some very serious harm, it is possible that we could rely upon the exceptions in the APA to justify a very brief and for that purpose only executive session. It's also possible that the wording of the Unification Act provides some leeway in that it says meetings of the Commission shall always be open, whereas the APA refers to all subordinate units, subcommittees, and so forth. It is possible that a matter that really needed to be discussed confidentially could be discussed in a committee of the whole or the subordinate committee of the body without violating even the letter of the unification statute. So I think that with those uncertainties on the point, Arliss's wording is good in that it gives us as much leeway as can be had under the statutes. And we would explore the exact parameters when the time came.
Mr. Chairman, if it's somewhat the sense of the body they'd like to consider this further, I would make a motion of substitution to amend the bylaws. But is there some feeling that that would be desirable?
So, I mean, what can I get on?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would move to amend the bylaws by substitution. This would be for Article 2, Item 5. It would read then, meetings of the Commission will be open to the public under the terms and conditions as specified in state law.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, the bylaws do call that a majority, a vote of the full membership of the Commission may at any regular meeting change the rules. So you can take just the majority vote.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? If there's no further discussion, Question is called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Go on, we have I'll ask Lisa Parker to give us a report regarding the executive secretary.
Deadline for sending in resumes is tomorrow. And we've gotten 2 at the borough clerk's office so far, and I've got 20 phone calls from interested people, and from, looking over the resumes and the people that sent them in and the way that the different people talked about it, I'm sure that there will be, some more tomorrow. And we'll pick up, I'll pick up the rest of them tomorrow at 5 tomorrow. And then we're going to have a meeting Saturday to go over them at the borough building.
Your committee will have a meeting Saturday
At 9,
to
10.
follow down to, then, as I recall it, we were to meet Tuesday at noon at the Sheffield House
Right.
to review the ones you are ready to present to us.
Right.
All right.
Right. So, probably by the end of next week, we can have an executive secretary.
Is that a meeting of the commission?
Yes.
Tuesday?
Tuesday noon at the Sheffield House.
Mr. Chairman, Lisa, we have a meeting Saturday at 10. Who again was on that committee?
Me and Jay and Mr. Josephson said that he would be at that meeting also.
Saturday,
And anybody else that wants to come the guards put on the thing. The borough in the assembly hall.
Rural Assembly Hall.
So we're going to act then
Tuesday.
Mr. Chairman, I'd rather be upstairs at room 303 on Tuesday.
Room 303. Okay.
Does it have water beds?
I didn't even know we had them upstairs.
On our facilities, I'll ask Jim Parsons.
Mr. Chairman, as you see, we're meeting here, and this was done by Jane. And we've checked further. Some of you may not know that since we met last Saturday and had gone and inspected Mr. Chai's office above Woolworth, which has a common reception area and a copying machine and very nice office and furniture. And we had agreed upon a figure for the use of his materials, but in checking with his attorney, it was felt that since this would require a reimbursement check to him from the borough, that there might be some kickback from it, and his lawyer suggested that it probably shouldn't be done. I'm sorry for that turn of events, because in our few minutes there, we thought the quarters were quite nice, and lovely, in fact, ideal. It had many things to recommend it. So that we have again opened up our search. I talked to Mrs. Kaiser this afternoon from the Cali Corporation, who indicated that she would check with someone and talk to me again in the morning. I finally got her this afternoon. Mrs. Haley called me this afternoon again, among other things, mentioned that there is space at 100 East Fireweed Lane, where Char sign is still up. It is my recollection that there was not much enthusiasm for this. She indicates to recommend it that there is plenty of parking. And that she usually gets $300 a month for it for the 2 rooms. And for us, we can have $275, and we can use her conference table and her copy machine. And that her hours of being there are not too steady, so if anyone wants to go look at it, she will make sure that she's there at a time certain. I peeked in the window. She had already left this afternoon. My enthusiasm remains about as it did. So that we're still in the market for space. Do you know the space that she has?
I'm sorry, I'm whispering down here. I asked Jane if she'd gone over there, and I think the commission had requested, and you didn't indicate that she had. In fact, she had.
I didn't know she had. I have too. And,
Okay.
maybe she has additional comments about it.
I don't think it's, I don't like it.
That wasn't what she said to me, but
For the record, I do not find it suitable.
We are unanimous in what we're doing.
Frank Harris has space available in the central building. I see him advertising office space in the paper over there. That's not too expensive in that building. Might try Frank Harris along lines.
good location. Good location.
Yeah, and the space is fairly inexpensive.
What do you call inexpensive? $1.25 square foot?
No, as I recall, there's one attorney over there has an office. I think he's paying something like $150 a month for his office. It's just one room, but it's a fairly sizable room. And it's Midtown.
Which one's the central?
It's
It's,
behind, well, it's across from the federal building on G Street.
Right opposite the Elks. You know that
Yeah.
small 2-story building opposite the Elks Hall.
About 80 cents, Jim. 80 or 90 cents.
Good location for people.
I see him advertising. I don't know what the story. They might call him.
Any other suggestions?
We're open. No, Jim will report back.
You're doing it for free, you don't have to worry about it.
I'd like to see, if possible, if we're able to charge much, that Jim would be authorized, if he finds a proper place, to go ahead and rent after consulting with the committee and the other matters.
Mr. Chairman, I so move for a minimum not to exceed, I don't know, what do you need, $5,000? $500? 400? Will 400 do it?
It's too high.
Yeah, we'll do it. I'm saying not to exceed,
I think that would,
not to exceed $400 a month. How's that?
Not to exceed our budget for the time period.
Your budget's only,
Sir,
Your budget's only $1,000.
that's a little more than the budget.
yes, sir. That's the reason I say, let's say not to exceed our budget.
1,500.
1,500 is the budget figure.
Well, the budget is an estimate, and there's a contingency down there, so frankly, I'd like to go a little over that, if I may. With permission of my second, whatever. What do we have?
Who moved? Nick Fisher moved, who seconded?
Yeah, well, I haven't gotten a figure yet.
Well, you're only talking about 3.5 months now. We'll keep fooling around talking about this for 3.
That's right.
And,
We $1,500 was in fact $1,500, okay.
What's your motion to?
400 a month, not to exceed $400 a month.
Second.
Who seconded? Carlos? Any further questions been called? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
before you move on in this item, it seems to me it's rather important that someone be contacting the appropriate people to see if we can get some equipment for that office. We can, go on down forever. We're going to need somebody to look into the typewriter and all the rest. Is that Jim's committee that's responsible for furnishings to?
Furnished office. Go to work.
It's a heavy
Mr.
responsibility.
Chairman, I just remind you that he should contact the finance department of the borough to find out about an account number and getting a purchasing order or an invoice.
Thank you.
Normal back.
No, her name is,
My understanding from Norm was that all we would have to do is supply and a check request, and he'll give us a check request form. We won't have to have an account number. This is my understanding. We'll supply us with a supply of check request.
We're probably gonna rent these things and do that in a day, you know. Deliver the going same day.
To go on, we have our standing committee reports, and probably the most important one is listed first, public opinion research, Chairman Jim Parsons. I want to, as you know, we voted to negotiate with the Roland Group last Saturday, and because I and several others of the commission had the understanding that the price was much lower than that reported on Monday evening, I felt that it's necessary to bring the commission as a whole to discuss so that the negotiation Tuesday noon, Roland met with a few of the group and did give us an alternate price. Price quoted Monday evening at the meeting of the committee was, as I recall it, 30,000. And we felt that was way above what we had understood. We understood at the time that we voted on it, therefore I felt it should be brought back. Tuesday, Mr. Rowan brought in a figure alternate basis of 20,000. So you have a summary, and I'll turn the rest of the information over to Jim. I want to understood that I'm the guy that really felt it should be brought back to the
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is one of those circumstances where I think that along the way we discussed price with either or both of the principals in this regard, but my recollection of the Saturday meeting is that we failed to do so thoroughly with either or both of the candidates. So that, with that, we were hit on Monday afternoon when we went over the first draft of our survey with the budget that was brought in that we requested Mr. Rowan to bring in. And after we got over our initial shock, we asked him to bring in a separate one indicating what he thought he could get with. And what we feel about the services of either consultant and me. And possibly
public hearing, which will get some, reach out to people.
discussions yield different
recognizing the problem with money, I responded by giving you 3 options on what I felt was a proper way of approaching it. I think all 3 are really proper, quite frankly. Each of them different. Taking option A, for example, we're dealing there with doing 2,100 interviews, which is an immense amount of interviews. It deals with 3 in-depth personal surveys that occur right now, beginning the next couple of days we go into the field, in the middle of the period, and prior to the referendum, with in-depth surveys that would be based on person-to-person interviewing, face-to-face interviewing with personal professional interviewers. Additionally to that, option A, you have to recognize that when I walked away from the meeting, I designed what I thought was the best thing I could have, okay, in order to come to understand the problem. I included a feature in it that is rather interesting and I think may yield information, and that was an addition of telephone interviewing following the in-depth interviewing. In other words, there in option A there would be approximately 1,100, 1,200 personal interviews broken into 3 parts, and in each case, after we got the results back from the first piece, we would sit down and decide what it is that we would, if we had like 5 or 10 additional questions, or questions that we thought needed further explanation, we could go back and ask people
those questions. Now, in an in-depth survey, you may go in with 100 questions, 150 questions, doesn't matter. In a telephone survey, you collect the phone while you're at home, and you go back on the telephone with the same interviewer, same respondent, and you collect this and you connect it to the other data. So you have a sample of a sample. And so then you go into the second piece, which is an in-depth thing, and you come back out. And then you take the telephone thing, based upon what questions you come out after that. Then you go into the third piece, which is really testing the charter, and you come back out with a final piece that would be a telephone survey, really to find out how people are intending to vote and why. And that would be conducted, just like a week before the election and so on, with the intention of being predictive. Now, that's a description of option A, and I think we can get into all those kinds of discussions. When I was asked to cut the budget as far as I possibly could, and agreeing totally with what Mary Farmiga said about the idea of using research as conversation, as communication. In other words, I love the phrase that they heard us and they know we heard us. Because if you use a system like this, it seemed to me that the system was what was to be to survive here. So what I did with option B is I cut out all the additional communications we could have, and went for the three basic communications: the first in-depth analysis, the second testing certain features, and third testing the charter as written and presented by you. And I got rid of all the telephone interviews, and that naturally cut down my time, the time Irene would spend in it, the interviewing time, the coding and editing time, and the printing and everything. So it cut it by 1/3. Third option I put in here, which I thought of after I wrote this budget, was the restoration of one panel back at the end, so that we could predict in some way how the vote would come out. I get a feeling at the end. Maybe that's not necessary. Maybe the only thing to really look at is option A or option B, and which one is the budget. Now, from my point of view, I have two feelings about this, and I'm sure Irene would agree with me on this. Option B, the cheaper of the two, is the easiest for us to do. Option A is way more complicated and involves, as you know, almost 1,000 more interviews and so on. And it is highly complicated to do. And just from a pragmatic point of view, it would be easier for us to do A or B and B or A, and I don't really care about it. In terms of how you do it, I do think that the basic feature that we're proposing here is 3 in-depth surveys, and that's what I would maintain is the thing you need. Now, from why would you have one over the other? I would have one over the other as an insurance thing. I threw it in for my own insecurity in dealing with the changeable nature of a problem that's as big as this one that you face, and which has gone down twice. I figured it was worth creating a model of communications and getting a maximum of feedback on a continuous basis, almost. This would be 6 major surveys we'd be doing in option A, and 6 major surveys in so many months. So we have a lot of feedback coming back and an immense amount of information, and so I was designing the $30,000 option as an ideal situation. You have to recognize that you're in a pretty unique position here, and so am I, because while I've done a lot of surveys and have designed citizen feedback system in Puerto Rico, which looks something like this. It goes into different subjects every 3 or 4 weeks, and we don't concentrate on one idea like this and bring it to a vote. So while I have total confidence and background in the technique, there is no history about this. This is something that is happening for the first time here. No charters have been written with the public through research. And as I explained before, this is why this proposal excites me. So, I mean, that's about as much as I can speak to it. I think either one of these things is really probably adequate. I'm not sure, which I would propose to you.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe.
can I inquire, Mr. Rowan, how many interviews have we done under option A?
Option A is, as you can see in the interviews, in section, in page 4, or, line item 4 of the budget. Option A shows payment for interviews, on personal interviews, and it pays, and it shows payments for telephone interviews. Option B shows no telephone interviews at all. There's no follow-up. Now, there are 1,200 interviews, personal interviews, involved in 4A, okay? There are 1,200. And what I did, the reason I reduced this from $8,400 for field cost to $5,600 in option D is I reduced the sample size. Now, I did this with Jack Peterson. You see, there's another area where, I'm being very conservative, and maybe it's costing you $1,000 or two, I'm not sure. But my feeling would be, I'd rather go, even though the University of Alaska and we ourselves, and I think everybody in town that's in this business has found that 300 is probably accurate, within 3% kind of framework for survey. I framed this at 400 because I don't want to make any mistakes. And I went over on each case, like on the sample size. Now, in option B, when you tell me that money is a big issue, well, then I'll bring it down to the most reasonable thing without compromising what I think is accuracy, right? So,
the option B would have less interviews, right?
900.
in the
900 is 1,200.
yeah. Yeah, all the telephone interviewing would be out altogether. That would just mean we'd have the 3 surveys, but we wouldn't go back. We did have questions. We'd have to keep that question until the next time we went back in the larger survey.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
what would be the effect if you eliminated the telephone interviews except at the last round when you were trying to get the predictive?
That's option C.
It's option C?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment here. It looks to me like we'll really know whether we need a telephone response question after we get the returns from our first in-depth survey.
That's right.
I don't think you're going to know sitting here at the table tonight whether you really want a telephone survey until you've seen the responses on that. I know I won't. I think that he's given us, in general, what he's proposing. I think that we could probably all come to a conclusion as to whether we want our samples to be 300 or 400 tonight. But I don't think we can make up our minds tonight as to whether we want telephone responses or not, and be satisfied with ourselves after we've seen the returns of the first one. I would suppose that Mike would hold to his proposal on costs and allow us to say, buy it as we go.
That'd be terrific.
If it would be agreeable with the rest of the commission. I think the main thing that we have to decide tonight is to whether we want to go with the minimum sample that they feel is reasonably accurate, or whether we really want to go to the 400, which they feel is darn accurate.
Mary, let me just before, let me just jump in there right there. The plan I had, even though you have 1,200 there, is to start with a survey of 300, to go to a larger survey
In the middle.
of 375, and to end with a survey that's 450 or 400, you know? Take 1,200 interviews, and I'm increasing the size each time, which tends to reduce the error each time.
All right.
Because I think as you get down to the end, that's where you have a problem with accuracy. That's it.
Chairman, I worked with one of your surveys when I worked for Parks and Recreation, the Recreation Survey.
Yeah, right.
Now, do you have in mind that this will be set up in the same general manner? Now that, picking a spot on the map and then going up a few houses and over?
No, we have a sample design.
I don't want to get too technical, but I guess what I'm aiming at is in the 300 samples that you take, my one criticism of that other time was that while we did the interviewing, a lot was done in the daytime. We missed a lot of people. I wasn't all that pleased with the way the sampling was done.
It's especially a problem with recreation where you have a situation where the kind of people you find at home when you're interviewing during the day are not representative fully of the thing. And the way to have handled that, which we proposed at the time to the borough, was if they wanted a proportional representation, it was easy to weight it back because we had large enough numbers in there.
But this particular method's not going to be done in the same
No.
in the same way.
Mr. Chairman, for purpose of discussion, I would move to approve option C, subject to the arrangement Mrs. Froney suggested, where option C could be augmented if the commission saw it on.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Second by Mr. Sheffield, moved by Mr. Josephson, that we take option C, subject to possible changes by commission during the course of the
Not all of us have the options in front of us. Maybe you better delineate a little better.
Option C is 3 in-depth interviews at 300 each with 1 panel back. Is that correct?
Option C, as I understand it, would cost $23,700. Would have an ample sample because he proposes a 10% increase in sample size.
I did. The sample was well.
But it would eliminate the what you call panel bats or the telephone series, except at the end where we would want it for predictive purposes, unless we elected later on, as Mrs. Froney suggested, to add that item.
Discussion. Mr. Holmes?
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little bit confused as to why we would want to necessarily predict right at the end versus having the panel back a little earlier so that we could do something about it. I mean, it's not going to do us an awful lot of good if we know a week ahead of time that we failed dismally.
Mr. Chairman, could he answer that?
We're all thinking to answer that question. Not answer your question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
No, I think that the problem with the panel back is that when you go into in-depth surveys, you're dealing with at least a 3-week field code and data processing time. So that if you backed up from the election and said, well, we wanted the last report to be, we want it 2 weeks before the election, you're talking about moving like 3 or 4 weeks back to start field working on a questionnaire. So you're dealing with a 6-week period in which you did the interviewing 6 weeks ago, you have the report 4 weeks ago, and my feeling is that right at that point, you could do something in the last 2 weeks. In fact, these campaigns usually occur in the last 2 weeks, and there might be some things to do there. But I'm not fixed on it anyhow. I think that if you have it in there, as Mary says, and it's optional, let's use it when we think we need it, or not at all.
Lisa?
I'm just wondering that, how are we gonna know how the panel backs are, what type of response you're gonna get back on the panel backs if you do it at the end instead of maybe at the beginning? Do it after your first call.
Mr. Sheffield,
Well, I want to speak in favor of the motion. I think we need to have C at least. I think the feedback at the end, I don't mean at the very end, but I think Ms. Holmes might be putting it just the day before the election, but I think if we had this information a week or 10 days before the election, how we're doing, then I think I envision that the commission will have speaking panels, they'll be going out and around, out in the field, a period before this and that, and we need to talk to those things that people are worried about if that's the case. And I don't mean it's going to change the charter, but we will talk to those things or talk to those issues. I think we would find out more. I think we need to know how we're doing at the end.
Jane?
I'd like to make a substitute motion that we take the sample size of 400 and assess the need for panel backs after the first survey is taken, negotiating the price with Mike, subject to the prices indicated on this.
Motion. Is there a second?
I would like to ask a question here. With the minimum number, how many were you talking in each one? Mike, say that again for me.
There would be 300 families selected 3 times.
900.
And with the one that Jamie's offering, it was increasing number each time.
No, it would increase it, option C would increase it by, make it like 330 or 340 interviews each time.
Now, wait a minute, you left me.
That's option C.
I think that Joe's motion was option C, and it would start out with 300. It would then, the second survey would be how many? And the third survey would be how many?
I misunderstood. I would take the total number of surveys and divide them in a way. I mean, I haven't thought that out exactly in terms of actually dividing it. But I would take the
All right.
1,000 interviews. I would increase it each time. Let's say that. So that
All right. With Joe's, we're talking about a total of 1,000, and with James, we're talking about a total of 1,200. Is that right? I'm not quite sure what the total number of in-depth surveys we're talking about is between the two.
How are you moving it, Jane?
What I want is the sample size to be 400, with
Oh.
total being 1,200. As I understood it, C gives you 900.
Yes. Well,
May I ask,
What I want to be as sure as we can of the number of people, I want to be doubly assured by increasing the sample size to 400, and I want to negotiate whether or not we do panels after we've got the results of the first survey.
and the easiest way to do this is the way I've done a lot of contracts which are cut off at the will of the contractor. Not just the panel backs, but all of them. So that each time we have to sit down together and do questionnaires together. So we certainly are going to know whether we're doing a survey or not. And, I'm going to make proposals, and you're going to make proposals on whether you need a panel back or not, or whether we need a second piece or not, and so on. And if we get into that arrangement, you can write a contract for option A, okay, and maybe spend $20,000 instead of $30,000. Just tell me not to do things, and so on. Okay.
All I'm saying is, I want the large sample size, and we'll just work it out from there as we go.
there's been a motion, but there's been no second.
You second.
Oh, good, second.
Chairman, I would speak against the substitute motion. I think it in essence is back to proposal A, to option A. And I think the adjusted motion that Mr. Josephson made serves us well and leaves us open for other input if we need to go.
I've not handled a substitute motion in this fashion, but I assume we go on the substitute motion first and then on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, as your parliamentarian, I would suggest that you, although I may be fired now that we have an attorney here, that you would, when it's appropriate, call for that motion. It becomes then the main motion before you and would require another vote. It could be amended unless the body would, well, that's the simplest way to handle it. So you're sure they know what they're acting on.
Mr. Chairman, going with option A and putting in, writing into the contract that, we can cut out anything we want at any time, in the end, we might be going with option C. And if we go, if we say we're going with option A, it leaves us more room to negotiate. And, we still might spend the $20,000, but if we say, okay, we're going to go with option C, then that limits us more.
I'd like to speak against the substitute. Mr. Rowan, who is our expert, says that option C would provide reasonable accuracy. As we sit here tonight, we don't know if in fact there are going to be any close propositions on that questionnaire at all. That maybe 90% of the voters feel one way and 10% the other on all those questions. So why do we have to worry tonight about going down to the fractional incremental gain in accuracy? Let's take the first survey on the option C scale. If we find that our expert comes back and says, I can't vouch for the accuracy because of the close division in the community, we can augment it. But I would rather start with that and augment than commit to what may be an unnecessary sample.
I don't really care one way or the other, but I'd like to call for the question so we get moving on.
Question didn't call for any further discussion. The question is, motion, substitute motion for using essentially option A, 400 sampling.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a problem in my head. I don't understand what a substitute motion is. Is that like an amendment to the main motion?
No, it's a substitute for it.
Takes its place.
Instead of.
Takes its place.
If it passes...
Does Roberts talk about that?
Oh, yes. If it passes, it becomes the main motion and is before us.
Little brown book about it.
Yeah, I got the little brown book, but I don't remember that.
That's the revised one.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
I've got the old
Yeah.
edition.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we could ask our, she's smiling, to read us the substitute motion.
Truthfully, I don't have it, because I don't know if I'm...
Could we ask Jane to do that then? She did, and you'll have it, of course, on the tape.
Jane, would you so read?
I will so read. The youth sample size of 400 and assess the need for panel decks after the first survey. Negotiating price with Mike as we go, subject to the prices indicated on this sheet.
Hope your tape recorders
What that last thing says is that a phone deck's going to cost $350 to
Questions called for? I think probably it'd be a hand vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? 3 to 7. Motion, substitute motion is lost.
Question on the original motion.
We don't have a motion.
Chairman didn't vote.
He always does.
He didn't at this time.
I did.
Question on the original motion.
Question. Original vote, motion.
What is the original motion?
The original motion is to take option C, provide for $23,700 for free in-depth surveys and one panel back survey. Mr. Fisher?
Was there also?
Just asking for the question.
The possibility of going on for the others if we wanted to.
That's also in there.
I just want to vote.
Mr. Chairman, I would point out before we move on that we do have a rule of procedure that follows that unless the commission directs otherwise by a majority vote, a commission member shall vote on all matters requiring action.
You're supposed to vote, Frank.
You better vote, Frank.
I'll vote against the substitute motion. Is there any further question on the main motion? Question has been called for. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered.
May I speak to a point of information before Mr. Rowan leaves? I sat in on the initial questionnaire that's being used, and it places great emphasis on whether one likes unification or not. I do want to put the caution out that the public pays a good bit of attention to polls, and polls can be a very guiding thing if they're properly used. If these polls come out against unification, a great disservice has been done to this commission, because no matter what we write, the public is going to be reading that it's against unification. So I would caution again on the matter of questioning, and I expressed this to you before, it doesn't come as new. I personally feel we're spending too much time replowing old ground by asking them if they like unification and whatnot. The purpose of this commission is not to take public polls, but to write a charter commission, and I think we ought to stay with that.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that to the extent that we want to spend the full commission's time on the design of the questionnaire, that we should have at it at a work session and discuss these very things. If you want to have the whole public opinion group work with Mr. Rowan and anyone else sit in, that's an alternate to that. I think the answer to that particular question is that by separating out in your questionnaire those who are against unification, you find out the reasons why they are against unification, so that you can dampen that disfavor and presumably pull them along with us. And the only way you can do that is to do a differential sort on those who are against unification, so that we know what makes them tick, and so that they can tick our way.
Mr. Schneider.
I'd like to come back again and repeat myself. The general public, when you talk with them, have the feeling that when they voted for unification, and unification's in, and because it's in now, a charter commission was created to write a charter. So all they're expecting from us is a charter. Now this is, regardless how the ballot was set up, this is the way the public feels.
Mr. Fisher was next.
Okay, I think that there should be no attempt to skew the answers in any way whatsoever, way, shape, or form. We'd be doing ourselves a disservice.
I'm not saying skew the answer.
Okay, that's what I heard.
I'm saying don't replow something that the public or the voter, the electorate feels they've already voted on. You're going to open up Pandora's box.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know procedurally how we plan on getting this survey reviewed by the commission, how we plan on keeping in contact with Mike. Is it at Thursday night commission meetings? Is it Tuesday afternoon at 2, which is impossible for some people who are working? And I want to know, okay, we hired him, we decide what we want, now we got to figure out some way to work with them and what our time frame is on.
Your questions are excellent. Basically, from the standpoint of the commission, we are all in this together, and any committee meeting that any commissioner wishes to attend, he's certainly welcome to do so.
That's not the problem.
No, that's number one. Number two, want to know what the, who the committee is.
No, I don't. I want to know, the implication of what Jim's statement was that at a work session, we're going to go through the questionnaire. Now, I don't think that's really the way we ought to proceed. I think that we ought to be working on this. This is our work session. And if,
I think Mike has it here tonight for everybody to look at.
Mike, if you have some comments.
I do have a finalized a third draft, but it might be a fourth draft, based upon the last 5 or 6 days, which we could look at now. I don't know if you want to take the time now to do this, or...
maybe I'd like to explain my frustration. That is that this week there were several meetings held and a lot of information being passed back and forth, and sometimes I knew about meetings and sometimes I didn't. And my concern is that all commissioners always know what's going on with all committees, and if perhaps it would be better to have work sessions in the evening when people who are working during the day can attend.
Mr. Chairman, I have no objection to that. What meeting didn't you know about this week?
She was out of town.
No, she knew the meeting about which she was out of town because I called her about it.
I
before
didn't
she
know
left
about a
town.
Tuesday meeting.
Well, the Tuesday meeting was confusing to a number of us, I think.
Okay, I'm just saying that confusion existed, and I do know the difficulties that I've had trying to contact Frank, and that Frank's had trying to contact me, the same, and I just think that somehow during this week I got lost, and I don't want that to happen anymore.
So I hope part of that problem probably gets solved when we get an executive secretary, I suppose, on board within office.
Mr. Chai?
Well, Jane, you have a good point. The only thing is we're on such a tight schedule that if we were to observe that, we're just going to plow into everything and not make the time. And that's why we have committees, and I think we're going to have to rely on a committee. But as Frank says, any one of us can sit in on a particular committee if we have a concern.
I think that the chair has been very careful that we have brought things back to the full commission for decision. I do think that the committees do have a responsibility, and it's really at their convenience that they meet. If the others can come, fine. But I think that we have the prerogative to set the matters that should come before it. And if the commission feels that this should be a matter of review by the full commission, I think there should be a motion made that will set it as a specific agenda item, and then we cover it in that fashion.
Jane, one thing I decided today, this morning, when I looked at the pile of stuff that had to get distributed and knew that I couldn't possibly get it distributed by mail, I didn't have a runner. I tried to call everybody and said, it's available here. I don't think that it's kind of tough at times, but I don't think it would be too difficult for committee heads when they're setting up a committee to call the whole charter commission, with only another 5 calls or probably, and just say, we're having a meeting at such and such place at such and such time, and leave the word. If you can make your plan, if you can't, but at least you're aware.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be such a big problem for any chairman.
And it's simpler than that, Mr. Chairman. Last week, I called our committee meeting at that evening meeting, and I think we can do that, and I think that's what we ought to do, so everyone here does know about it. I plan on another, well, the chairman's back now, so it's up to her, but I hope that she'll announce tonight where our meeting is next week, and it won't be there. That's what I think we should do.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that if it midstream seems to be necessary to have a committee meeting, that we should make an effort to contact every. I don't think we should limit ourselves only to those meetings announced at our regular meeting.
But that if additional ones are called, that we make an enormous effort to make sure that everyone knows about it. As we get headquarters, we'll have those posted.
Well, we'll use our office force to do that.
Sure.
Okay.
Do you think that
That's okay. I was just frustrated.
No, I think it's important that we leave no one out at any stage. And I'm still concerned when we have more than one applicant for any job with the commission that we have left no one with any attitude of sour grapes, because we need everyone along with us that we can get in every way fashion possible to do legitimate.
When do we plan on going into the field with these surveys?
off the meeting day, I would assume. From what Mr. Roll has said.
As soon as you approve the finalization.
Mike, I thought part of your sales pitch to us on this thing was that in addition to making a public forum, you're also going to be selling for us,
Selling for you.
putting things across for us, right?
In the research.
Yeah.
Well, not only wouldn't I do that, but, I mean, that's an impossibility in research. I mean, it's not even,
Well, what-
something you don't do, but that,
What I'm getting at in your questioning, why do you use if the two governments are unified? Why can't you say, with the governments unified? Why are you iffy in everything you're asking?
well,
You're kind of leading. You're opening the box again, aren't you?
Well, I don't think so, Fred. I mean, we disagree on this. The key to me is always finding out where the opposition is, and in dealing with strengths and weaknesses. So one reveals strengths, and one finds weaknesses. One also tends to invite somebody who happens to be opposed into a conversation. This is one half of a conversation. The other half we don't have, which is why we're doing this. And it's only one half of the conversation, and we want to write questions that to you may appear biased, but I'm trying to make them as fair as possible so that people who are opposed will deal with this and tell us exactly how they feel and explain exactly why they're doing what they're doing. Does anyone know how to deal with it?
It's still my feeling that you're, and across repeating myself, you're asking somebody if they like chocolate ice cream, and the guy says no, and then you proceed and you say, now we're going to write a set of rules around chocolate ice cream. And these are the rules, after he's told he hates it.
Mrs. Holmes?
Mr. Chairman, if we had had a very strong turnout at the polls, I think this would be all unnecessary. But we've had such a small group voting on the question that we may find ourselves up against a bigger
What do we do if it turns out they're all against unification?
Well, you find out at the end, Fred, anyhow.
Well, what do we do as far as the charter is concerned?
We
Sit
try
not
to
write
find out why they're against it.
Well, how's that going to write the charter?
It may be that it will help us write the charter if we know exactly why they're against it. For instance, I'm quite sure it will. I feel sure it will. If you know why a person is against it, maybe you can make the charter so that it is equitable and takes care of that fear.
You're going to have to write it in a manner where it's not unified or satisfying.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make two comments. I don't know about what the rest of you have been saying, but when folks have asked me what the Charter Commission is doing and saying, I have said, well, there are 11 of us, and 11 of us have quite a few different ideas as to what we think should be in the charter. But what we're trying to find out is what the people want in the charter. And I think this system does help us find out what the people want in the charter. Not what I want, not what you want, but what the people want. And if we're successful, we have to ask them all of these questions in my mind. We're not assuming anything, but we're asking them. Now, if you want to assume, I guess we'll have to take a vote and see whether 6 out of the 11 want to assume. I don't, for one. I want to find out what they think.
No, I don't want to assume. I think the front part because the only thing I disagree with, I think the balance of it is good. I mean, where he asks whether you want a mayor type or a city manager type, these are the things that we're trying to find out if the public wants. I think the first part could get one so thinking about unification that he misses his thoughts on the second one. I mean, he's so concentrating on these questions about why did you vote for unification? If you didn't vote for it, why didn't you vote for it? And things of that sort. I thought possibly, since we're talking about the charter, let's ask only questions that pertain to the charter and not get into unification at all, or consolidation, as some people like to call it. Mr. Chairman?
Fisher?
In deference to Ms. Amick, wanted to go through this and discuss it. You know, I have a lot of confidence in the Rowans and what they've done here. And more than anything, I may have some questions, but I regard this as a kind of a professional effort. And although it certainly has to be put together with people that are concerned about the subject, which has been done, I would just as soon not go through this as a commission at this point. And if and each one of us in his own time, tomorrow I'll go through it. And if we have some questions, perhaps Mr. Rowan, perhaps we call Mr. Rowan, ask him about those things. I'm certain that if any one of us bring up a point that is central and demands a change, that he'll make that change before going into the field. And we've got a lot of work to do tonight, and I'd just as soon proceed ahead.
One thing I might ask while we're at this point is, what is Mr. Rowan's phone number?
Yeah.
272.
I wasn't sure, Mr. Rowan.
272-5439 or 272-5430.
Say that last one, 5-4.
Would it be appropriate for Mr. Rowan at this point to give us a little dialogue on what he's presenting to us at this point?
I can go through the question in terms of what kind of thinking is behind it and what we're trying to find on the first shot.
I think that would be good because we're all here together.
Page 1, we're dealing here essentially with the referendum. I start that with the point of reference here, and I'm dealing with people who voted for and against, and if they did not vote, why they didn't vote. And I think that goes all the way to question 14. I'd like to bring your attention to question 11, 12, 13, 14. It's very important to me, it seems to me, at this point, to ask people these questions. What you know about it, what would you say are the two or three best arguments for and against unification? First, what would you say are the best arguments in favor of unification? Very significant to find out how many people who are against unification can mention arguments in favor. And secondly, and what would you say are the best arguments against unification? And here you find the people who are for it in some way telling you what's against. And here you find out how much of the other position are in the people who favor or oppose. And it seems to me that's something to analyze in terms of writing the chart. Now, from question 15 on, we really do, we say now forgetting the unification question. And we really do. We go into a series of questions trying to find the context of the problem. First, the important problems facing people, and then a series of what people's expectations and assumptions would be if the government were unified. I'm not opposed to saying, when it's unified or in any other way, or say, were the city and borough governments unified, you feel that this will affect First of all, the problems they mentioned as the major problems in the community, all right? Will it affect the government services they're receiving? Will it affect the rates of taxation as the way they see it? Will it make any change in the voice they have in the government? And as you know, there are follow-up questions on each of these, trying to find out exactly what changes people see as coming around, if that is the case. Will the government's unified? Do they see any change in zoning? Do they see any change in the educational system? Right? Those are areas we chose pretty much largely out of our group meetings prior to this one, and I'm more than happy to add others or delete these if you feel that that's the case. We added this one today, the two governments unified. This is question 34. Two governments unified before seeing any change in the number of employees of the local government. Size is going to be significant. Now, from 36, we began to get into this a perennial problem that everybody in the survey business down here. We know that we have to win this in both parts, so we went into here talking about, is there a natural advantage to unification, or is it a natural advantage to both, residents of both? And to tell us what those advantages are, if they think they happen to be in one or the other. And do they feel that the Charter Commission itself can write a fair charter which represents all of them? What are their assumptions about you? We learned this in 39 and 40. Most of these questions obviously are going to be followed with the words of the respondent. We only have half the conversation here. And how you rate the job of the Charter Commission on 41. And then on 44, we start with a new thing. This we took from Mary Froney's questionnaire, which we should get into in a moment. This goes to the tax question, which may be the central issue here. Do you feel that the services you're receiving are equivalent to the tax dollars you pay? And where would you say your tax dollars are wasted in local government? I think we've got to find out where people think their money is wasted if we are creating a new government with the charter. And then 46, 47, 48, 49 are taken directly from Mary's questionnaire. And let me get back to that in a minute when we get to that section. On question 50, we get to the name of the government, what people would propose as the name of the unified government, and then what methods they would favor to meet school costs. And 52 is the exact wording from the recent referendum.
I don't believe this is the exact wording on the referendum. The wording on on 52.
What type of executive system do you prefer?
I don't like this.
I want you to look at it carefully and make suggestions. I didn't believe, and I think most of you didn't believe, that the wording that was on the election thing was not slanted. It was slanted. I think we all agreed that it was. So what I tried to do in working with Irene yesterday is to take the slant out of it, if possible. And I want your comments as to whether it was successful or not in taking the slant out of it.
Mr. Chairman, Miriam is searching for the results of the opinion poll and not finding it. They'll be here. But when you talk about the strong mayor, what's considered in this community has been two things: quote, the weak mayor when George received $6,000, and the strong mayor when he received $30,000. I think it's a question that the community has never really expressed an opinion. I think it's an element I do not wish to see introduced, and that is a strong mayor with a veto power. I think that gets into a whole concept of government that has not been perhaps utilized within the state of Alaska. Or I could be wrong on that, but I think really what the people were responding was the strong.
All right. Have you read what number 1 includes here, Arliss?
Yeah, but he has veto power, but no legislative vote.
That is Mr. Roderick, Arliss. This is not Mr. This is not Mr. Sullivan. This is Mr. Roderick. Arliss, you haven't read it, I don't believe.
I read it.
Well, then we've used the wrong nomenclature here in calling it strong. This
What
was.
do you think about taking out the...
Then we're not using the right nomenclature if even you're mixed up on
What
it.
about taking out the word, the strong mayor, full
All
salary?
right, just say.
Just leave the description, yes.
All right. How about
Say
that?
what?
Instead of leaving the name on it of a strong mayor or whatever, just say a mayor elected with a elected full-time, comma, with veto power, but no legislative
I don't
vote.
think this still does it. Maybe that was my question. The mayor is the administrator under this system, and I automatically read that and looked toward, say, a mayor council form. But we don't state in here that he is the administrator. He can hire this man to help him, but he administers the borough. That's what Jack does.
Okay.
But it doesn't say that.
That's a good thing to add. You could say the mayor is elected as full-time executive officer of the government with veto power but no legislative vote.
All right, you want it stated that he has administrative power. The fact of the matter is, a man that is elected mayor may or may not have administrative capacity. Whether he
The executive, though, you see.
Well, Chairman, I think that can be true of governors too, right?
yes. If you want to put it in there, I think it's perfectly all right.
I'm not trying to...
Mr. Chairman, we get into an area here, and it's a little hard to do some research here, but does Title 29 set forth wording for what the two forms? I believe it does.
My only concern was that these were too complicated, that am I right, that someone orally taking this would be awful confusing?
We don't have exactly what we do it, Joe. A card will be made up with these 4 alternatives.
It might be checked off on a chart.
Keep it simplified, just ask for administrative versus a political mayor. Use common language in your survey, don't get complicated.
Mr. Chairman, what would political mayor Parker, please? Let's give Ms. Parker a chance.
In Title 29, it states borough executive and administrative powers generally. If the borough has not adopted a manager plan, the borough executive and administrative power is vested in an elected borough mayor. If the borough has adopted a manager plan, the administrative power is vested in an appointed manager, and the executive power is in an elected borough mayor who has the same functions as those of a borough mayor of a manager plan, city under blah blah of this chapter.
Now, is that clear?
No.
Yeah, very clear.
That is not clear.
Clear as a dingbat. You're gonna read that to a guy in a poll? No wonder why we're paying $20,000 for a poll. We're gonna spend all day with one guy.
I would
Reading all that crud.
You could say the borough executive and administrator is an elected borough mayor, and
Why don't we just keep it simple?
Section on that, Lisa.
pardon?
What's the subsection?
Section 29, 23, 130.
29?
29, 23, 130.
Mr. Chairman, if I were asked these questions on a poll, my first reaction would be to say, oh, do you mean like Mayor Roderick? And my next thing would be, oh, do you mean like George Sullivan and Mr. Roderick? I know that we're trying to stay away from getting into personalities and getting into our two existing local governments, but isn't that what the people are going to ask us?
Right, they do. That's what we're asking them.
Why don't we say it? I guess what I'm saying is, will we slant the results if we don't say it to everyone and some people ask and other people don't? Are we going to get some of the responses confused responses and some of them intelligent responses?
Well, the key at all times is to ask the same questions, the same way, provoking.
Mr. Chairman, it would be my feeling, and maybe Mike thinks differently on this, that to every extent that you allow your questioner to say, yeah, like Mayor Sullivan or like Mayor Roderick, you have then prejudiced your poll because you're getting the personalities in it. And I would suspect that he would instruct his questioners to not answer that kind of question, but to do it exactly in this pure form.
Yeah, they say, I don't know, and they read it over again.
Jane?
Yeah, I think the problem that we have with this question is that we have to, we're educating people at the same time we're asking them questions. And you're giving information so they can respond to it. I think there are hundreds of people out there who don't know the difference between Jack Roderick and George Sullivan as far as what their duties are. And so I don't like the language in Title 29. It's far too complicated. It might be something like, do you like it where the mayor runs the show, or do you like it where the council runs the show? It's
Simple language.
Okay, let me see if Mike wants to look at this. Suppose you presented these kind of alternatives. Number one, I think you eliminate the strong mayor thing, because that has a ring to it.
A daily ring.
The mayor serves full-time with veto power but no legislative vote and is the chief administrative officer. Okay. Number two, the mayor serves full-time as part of the legislative body, having one vote but no veto power. A professional manager is hired. Number three, same as number two, except the mayor serves only part-time. Part-time, is that?
No, not quite, because that doesn't, Mr. Chairman, that doesn't really present the alternative that I'm fondest of, which is number one.
Number one, the mayor serves full-time with veto power but no legislative vote.
Well, but you left out the professional manager is hired and answerable to the mayor.
All right.
Not the legislative.
Well,
Well, wait a minute, that doesn't happen to be the one I'm...
May I make a comment?
I don't know if my alternative is here. I better read it again.
It is in one properly stated.
Don't you?
Last-
Kingdom
the
and
mayor serves full-time but doesn't do anything.
Last week, we had a meeting with, what was his name, Frank? At, Mark King, all right. He went through describing these various alternatives of the way the power is divided. Now, obviously, by putting these mayors up in front instead of how the managers are selected and who they're responsible to and then what the mayor's powers are, has gotten this group confused, and obviously I didn't do it well enough to satisfy you because you don't like the word strong mayor.
Well, more than that.
And it doesn't quite describe everything that's supposed to be in here, but I would suggest that we get these other terms that need to be spoken to in here. And I don't think we do want to go with like George Sullivan or like Mayor Roderick. That is not simple, because most folks do not realize that Mayor Roderick does have a professional manager, and that manager is hired by him and is answerable to him. He's not hired by the legislative body nor answerable to the legislative body. He's hired by the mayor and answered to him. In the other form that we have locally, the manager or the professional manager is hired by the legislative body and is answerable to the legislative body. Now, the difference as to whether it is a strong mayor or a weak mayor is whether he has a single vote on the legislative body or whether he has a veto. There is the other connotation, if he's a strong mayor, that he is an elected executive. Now, if you want to get in that elected executive, I think there's too much emphasis put on it because quite often they do not have any executive capacity. Really, they're elected because they are well thought of. Not really because of their administrating or executive capacity, though they may have the name. I have no objections to your saying that they are the elected executive, if you want to have it.
Well, they are.
All right.
Let me just ask Mr. Rome a question. And the option to, number one is an option I think personally happen to like, but it doesn't include one item, and I wonder if it's important in your view. And the item is that the professional manager must be is appointed by the mayor but ratified by the assembly. In other words, the assembly can refuse to hire someone. Is that a... No, I'm not trying to... I really...
No, this is another
But
alternative.
I don't know if that's an additional alternative.
Get them all right.
But I think it's a distinct... well, I don't know if it's distinctly different than number one.
But he's ratified like a department head. It's not, there's nothing in the law that says he even has to hire one.
I'm wondering that if we just can't go with the way that this is put out right here, and then in another poll, go more in depth, because, you know...
No, we need to correct this, Lisa. We need to correct it so it
So we can put more
Could
options
I
down.
get a response, please, for everybody?
Well, I think you're offering another alternative. And I think this may come down that number 4 has 4 responses, than all the 3 you talked about. And I think that it may, because of the kind of division there is here. It's not, wouldn't be surprising to me to find the same divisions in the community where people say, well, look, I like a little piece of number 1, some of number 2, some of 3, and I got this other idea on my own. We're going to copy that down, find out exactly what they are. It's not likely to be a consensus on this. So if you want to make another option, I'd say good. I think make as many options on this as possible. I wouldn't worry about...
Okay. Is that a distinctly different option, do you think, than one? Where the only difference is ratified by the assembly.
Well, Dick, I'm with you that I want as many options on there as it'll get us some kind of feedback.
I would make it another. I would keep them the same. I would. My advice would be to get rid of the first ones, the strong mayor full salary. I think the other words say that. Okay.
Mike, may I suggest something that Carlos has said here? Instead of calling it a strong mayor, call it an elected executive mayor, full-time and salary. And then go ahead with the description given in there. Could you accept that, Arliss?
Yeah, well, I was going to amend it somewhat different. Go ahead, Mary. What are you saying?
I'm suggesting that on number 1, we call that, instead of the strong mayor, let's don't say strong mayor, let's say elected executive mayor, full-time and salary.
Okay.
The mayor is elected full-time with veto power, but no legislative vote. The professional manager is hired and answerable to the mayor, hired by and answerable to the mayor, not the legislative body. And then we could go ahead and...
Then the second would be the mayor is elected full-time with veto power with no legislative vote. Professional manager is what? Hired by the mayor and ratified by the legislative body?
Are you talking about number 2 now?
I'm talking about another Jake's option.
He's talking about new number 2.
Hired by the
1A, right.
Same as number 1, but ratified.
Same as number 1,
The same.
ratified by the legislative body? All right. That would be a 1A.
Then the third one would be what is number 2 here. The appointed manager was full-time mayor. Anybody have any feelings about the wording there? I think it seems fair.
Keep it simple.
I believe that you ought to have these in parallel form, so I think that you would start off with mayor, full-time and salary.
Yeah.
Has a legislative vote but no veto power. The professional manager is hired by and answerable to the legislative body. So that you kept that in parallel form to your first.
Okay, that's no problem. We're just naming it that way.
So, you have a question, or
Well, I have one more point to raise here, Mr. Chairman. Under number 3, wouldn't the mayor ordinarily not only be a member of the legislative body, but chair, or preside, shouldn't that be?
Under number 2?
3.
Number 3.
3 in the,
No. Okay.
We're getting kind of deep.
I think both on 2 and 3, usually the mayor presides.
Yeah, but why do we have
Because
that
he has
kind
the
of
vote.
detail?
It says it's...
We're asking for a general concept, a form. What
Right.
went all this detail? I mean, you're just gonna, in fact, why not relate the words a voter is used to? City council, the mayor, the city manager. Use those words. And he can relate to it very quickly. If you say, do you want a manager, a city manager, and a mayor who answers to the city council or something like
but I mean,
that?
I think it's just these relationships, Fred, that have created immense problems in
Yes.
this community.
Yes, you are.
When
You're
we
trying
talk
to
when we talk
polarize
to
it
this fellow,
again.
Mr. Keene, who's an expert consultant in city affairs, and he made the description to Mary and myself and whoever else was there, he did it very simply. He talked in terms of a political mayor versus an executive mayor, and he used very simple terminology. He didn't go into any of this very fancy stuff. He was very understandable to a voter.
Mr. Chairman, I just think, Fred, that would make people think that, the city is spreading its tentacles.
City's gonna win.
It's going to win, and it's going to be the city taking over. It's another form of annexation. I would rather stay away from that.
You can talk about borough, you can talk about assembly, and you can talk about city council.
We're talking about legislative bodies, we're not talking about council, we're not talking about assembly, intentionally.
Could we move on?
I have another issue I'd like to propose to address. One of our constituents, told me that it was his perception that in a city council kind of setting, where the staff is working for the mayor or working for an elected manager, it's very hard for the assembly or legislative body to really exercise a true independent judgment, because all of the mimeograph machines come up through the administration, all the memoranda represent a distilled version of the conflict that did occur at lower levels of the government, so that the elected official isn't really exposed to that kind of give and take. And looking back on my own experience, I think that's a correct observation. His solution to it was that some type of staff should be provided on the legislative side, either by way of researchers or counsel available to the legislative branch. And I'd like to know if there is any sense of that as to whether there's a feeling that would be extravagant and wasteful and redundant, or whether perhaps that need might be seen by the public.
Joe, I might comment briefly that I believe that the second version of the charter last time around did provide that the assembly could hire its own staff as it saw fit.
I think that perhaps we covered this question pretty well for the first and perhaps the chairman of the
We have 4 options and we have a field with consensus.
Let's continue on with the question, we'll see what other...
Well, that's what I was doing. I would like to know if that can be done, and that's for any technical reason why
To add a question, not in this question, but to add a question.
not under the executive, not under the mayor. I apologize if I brought up the wrong point. But as to, I really want to find out how they feel about a separation of powers concept between these branches, where the legislative branch wouldn't be dependent upon the executive input from the executive.
So you say the question would be like, should the legislative body have their own staff?
Independent staff.
Rick just called my attention here to the most recent charter that was prepared under Dick. And it says under section 208, the Assembly may appoint special legal and financial advisors. The Assembly may retain such legal counsel and other staff as it requires for the execution of its legislative function. The Assembly shall appoint a municipal clerk and staff and prescribe the duties of that office. The clerk serves at the pleasure of the Assembly. So
Yeah, but Mr. Chairman, I want to know, A, if I voted as a charter commissioner for that proceeding, for that kind of language, am I getting the charter in trouble? Or B, should I make it mandatory?
you would better be show up in the
poll.
There's no reason why it shouldn't.
I think so.
I can see.
Mr. President, I would like to see a question that has to do with Mr. Josephson's question in the poll. I know that the Assembly has at times felt that it should have some staff of its own to go into research. Now, we have appointed an ombudsman that we can ask to do a little bit of this, but it is fairly minor. I know that at 2 different times the present President of the Assembly has every intention of attending staff meetings. I know that at one time one of the other presidents of the Assembly attended staff meetings to try to get the conflicting input that was going into these things, and to help on that score. Myself, I solved the situation by go around the departments and I find out what the arguments are before they get to the Assembly. But there is a question that Mr. Josephson is raising that is a very legitimate question, that unless you do have some separate staff, you may be left without enough information to make a reasonable alternative decision to what the administration proposes.
I've written a question right here. In unified government, would you favor the provision of additional staff directly to the legislative body and independent of the staff appointed by the mayor?
Answerable to the legislative body.
The last phrase tends to weight it in some direction, I think.
Read it again. Read it again.
In the unified government, would you favor the provision of additional staff directly to the legislative body and independent of the staff appointed by the mayor?
Well, that additional weights it.
I don't mean appointed by the mayor, you see, because that weights it in terms of one form.
Let's shorten the question to, in a unified government, would you favor the provision of staff directly to the legislative body? Yes or no? And if no, why not?
Okay.
That covered it pretty well, Joe. I think so.
Hired by and answerable to the legislative body. A small staff hired by and answerable to the legislative body.
Mr. Chairman? Procedurally here, Mr. Josephson brought up a point that wasn't in here, and I've got a couple of points I'd like to bring up that aren't in here. Could we wait until Mr. Rome gets through it and then bring up those points? Because how do we really know if they're not in here if we haven't been through it? That's the sense of divide.
Some of us have.
This would go kind of along with question 55, when it says what changes would unification bring to service areas. Along that same line, could we ask if they favor service areas within their, respective neighborhoods, whether they favored, like you have...
Every neighborhood has a service area?
Acres broken up, and, Muldoon, the service area, and Hillside, and Rabbit Creek. That area's a service area, downtown's a service area. And, if it was a, we went with,
Lisa, presently, we have service areas that cover the entire borough for the same service, rather than just having Muldoon with its road improvement district, Sand Lake with its road improvement district.
not,
Is this what you're speaking to?
no. This is where, if they wanted additional services, the voters directly would vote on, the people in that area would vote directly upon it. And
Is the example one like some homeowners over here in City View or something decided that they were going to allow themselves to be taxed to put some parkland?
That the park improvement district is what they did.
And they were the only ones.
Yeah, the only one.
To that.
We do have local improvement districts. That would be a type of local improvement district.
Right.
The question might be difficult to word to make it clear, but I don't think.
I see what she's after, I think.
Wrong.
Get it in.
I rephrase so I could, I didn't hear a lot of this going back and forth.
The question up here was about local service area, voting on a local service area concept, or actually a local improvement district concept rather than a local service area.
Isn't that what 55 is attempting to do, with leaving it wide open?
Mr. Chairman, 55 is going to get you nothing. It really is. You've got, and a lot of people don't even understand what a service area is. We've got one that covers the whole bowl, let's say, for sewers. One that covers service area 30 for parks. We have, fire and all the rest. Would it bring to service areas? I think you'll just get back a glob of really nothing with that.
I welcome a better question than you really are.
Yeah, it's a bad question.
Well, Mr. Chairman, why don't we direct it at services instead of service areas?
We did already. We have
Somewhere else.
Yeah, that's
Where is that?
That's early on. We asked people in 23, two governments are unified before creating changes in the government services in the United States. And if so, what changes do you foresee? And they'll be telling us what they...
I was going to say, because the service areas would certainly confuse you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me there's several issues that'll face the commission. One is going to be the basic question that was wrestled with by the last charter, and that was, how do you add additional services? Do you go to the public for their vote, or does the legislative body have the ability to do it? You are going to have the problem of the present service areas as to whether in effect you go into an area-wide power. To give an example of the non-area-wide library power, then becoming an area-wide power. And the two, say the service area 30 parks outside of the city and the parks and rec within the city, should that be combined? Then you have an additional power of such things as the port, the Fine Arts Museum, and so on. Do we spread those area-wide, or must we add those only by going to, some kind of a vote of the people? And I think it's such a complex thing that to try and do it by a simplistic answer here will give you zilch. And I frankly think that would take quite a bit of time to work out. We need to know, as a body here, what those questions are before we can ask them.
Yeah,
And I don't think we're quite prepared to
I
do
can't
that.
agree with you all. I think my recommendation is to get rid of 55, leave the other question in, so people assume something's going to change. Something's going to change.
Leave what in?
Leave the earlier question in.
Wrote earlier.
The question 23,
Oh, I see.
that didn't deal with service areas, but rather services received
Yeah.
and attitudes towards others. And take this out, and if we and frame the second questionnaires are largely around this kind of idea. If it turns out that in the first one we feel this is a significant area to get into, it's too complicated to handle in one easy question like
Really, you
this.
can't do it.
Commissioner, as a substitute for that, I'm just going to offer a suggestion. Again, Mr. Rowan's the expert, and I'll let him do anything he wants to with it. But, I think the essential question is whether or not the people in these individual districts want the opportunity to be able to vote on these additional services, or whether they'll trust the legislative body to instill those services.
Where are you here?
And I'm not anywhere. I'm talking off the top. And I think that's the essential question.
Why not ask?
Doesn't sound like I'm talking.
Why not ask it?
Well, I am talking off the top. Isn't that the essential question that we're trying to get to?
Well, it is. I wanted to find out what the attitude of people towards the changing of the government would affect, whether they would lose services because the service district lines would be changed, or a decision would be made outside, as you said, in the legislative body, without regard to their voting, as they do in each case now, for every service.
Well, they don't know they vote in each case now. I mean, I think you're asking all the different questions.
Sure, go ahead.
I think, but it demands more depth, but shouldn't we leave something on here? It's up to you, but that's just...
Couldn't we ask them if they're first or second class rated?
No, that prejudices again. I think the essential question, though, that we're going to have to address ourselves to is whether or not we give the power to the legislative body to be able to extend services, or in fact, we reserve that power to an individual vote to extend for the extension of services.
I mean, an individual service area vote.
No. Whether or not services can be extended by the legislative body, or they can be extended only upon the vote of the people that are going to receive those services.
Well, people ask me what kind of services you're talking about.
Well, then that's the problem with the question, and maybe that's what you're going to get.
Well, that's why we were, getting into something like, maybe this is something to avoid for the meantime, and come back to, unless you want to get to it in depth.
It could be, but I think there's a philosophical, I think that there is a philosophical answer to the question, a general philosophical answer, whether they're willing to trust their legislative body. I suspect we're going to be a little disappointed, but that's all.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we should avoid it at this point. I don't think we're going to be any better off the next time we go around. And I think we know on whether to put in how services are going to be extended. I guess I'm thinking
or detracted.
I think if we talk about it a little bit and put our minds to it now, we can come up with a good question. I think putting it off isn't going to solve anything. We're not going to know any more the next time we go around.
Why don't we just ask the question directly?
What is the question?
The way Dick just described? I so moved.
I mean, either he's going to be able to vote on it or he's not. That's legislative bodies
gonna do it. That's his problem, how to put it in.
How about this question here?
We're getting too probing at this thing.
You could ask people as general rules, do you favor the extension of government services?
By A or B?
To the legislative, through legislative action or through a vote on the matter?
Extension or elimination of.
Well, wait a minute.
No.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Services you can eliminate.
Whatever the people want to eliminate.
That's our power up at...
Matt Subaru just took out Park Power.
How about just saying changes in services? Changes in good.
Right.
As a general rule, do you favor the changes of government services coming about through legislative action on the legislative body or action on...
No. Yeah, that's not well worded.
Adding or subtracting. I think
Add local to that, local legislative. Local legislative.
Since you make it easy,
How about provision?
say extension or elimination of services should be provided by A, legislative body, B, vote of people.
That's this question.
That's best. I'll go for that one, Jane.
That's too simple. That's too simple, Jane.
Extension
Or elimination.
Chocolate ice cream with
or
sprinkles.
elimination of services should be provided by A, vote of the legislative body, B, vote of the people.
Could we say provision of services and use the word provision instead of extension or elimination?
You can use all three. Say provision, the provision, extension, or elimination of government services should be...
That's right. That's right. That fits it all in.
Yes.
Extension or elimination of services should be provided.
You could say questions regarding the extension or elimination of government services will be resolved by a legislative vote of the local assembly, local legislative body, or B, a vote of the people.
If you said by ordinance or by vote, people know the difference?
Those two are, excuse me.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is taking out the or elimination. I don't know why it bothers me to have that thought thrown in to that question. I'm trying to use the word provision as an all-encompassing term meaning extension or elimination.
No, but provision has the connotation of adding or giving or providing, not taking away.
How about deleting?
One of the prime fears that my area has is that the only thing that is ever being offered to them is taking on more services, that they're never given a chance to get rid of some that they don't want as much as they've got. And I think we need to say addition or subtraction, and however you're going to say it.
Let's use the word increase or decrease of government services then.
Right.
Say it.
Can we say, what are those that they have that they don't want?
Okay.
Well, it depends on who you're talking to.
We're confusing a couple of concepts maybe. Services and powers. Surely we're not going to have a charter that says that you can't increase service without a vote of people, because I thought that's what, if you could do it without raising taxes, that's what all politicians promise.
We're really talking about power.
Well, we're talking about our powers, aren't we? Well, that's what Title 29 is all about. That the power of your municipal government.
We're talking about exercising powers rather than having powers, I believe, because I think the majority of the folks around here have been talking about a home rule borough, which some folks think has all power. And I think we're talking about the extensions of powers and services going to be, or the subtraction of powers and services going to be by the two methods.
So that I think in your area at least, the question is whether a new municipality should have the right to extend, to add to its powers upon the vote of the legislative body or only upon approval of the people.
Yeah, that's really what you're talking about. You don't want police put on you unless, for
Unless
instance,
we ask for it.
that you vote upon it.
That's right.
So we're talking about powers.
I wonder
talking about
if
both
there
powers
needs to
and
be a fee to that either kind of thing. Or do you want them mutually exclusive that way?
Oh, no, these are all, they'll say neither.
Okay.
They'll add
The question I come out with is the matter of increasing and decreasing government services should be settled, A, by the legislative body, B, by general vote, C, other, you tell me. Okay.
Can we move on, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to talk about that. If we're talking in terms of, there's a very great difference as to the level of service that we give. Let's say we are going to have 10 policemen or 5. That gets into the question of services. I do not want to see that go on. I think what we want to know is whether we are going to have police or not. When we're talking about service, people can think in terms of level of service, and that, to me, is not what we want to find out.
No, we're talking in terms of powers rather than service, Mike.
It really sounds like a
We're talking about powers rather than questions, extending a power or detracting from
The
a
only
power.
thing is because of the discussion that there seems to be confusion in the mind here, and I'm not so sure it wouldn't be confusion out there, Mike, is the only thing.
Arliss, would it be more understandable if we use both the word power and services?
No, then that's
No,
really
I think we are talking about power.
We're really talking about powers, I'm sure.
You could say it should be settled by the powers of the legislative body or by the general vote.
No, but you've got services there. That's where we think we're not so sure.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we're all concerned, and I know Mr. Joseph is a better lawyer than I am, seeing as how I'm not a lawyer at all. But
I appreciate that, that's great.
that didn't come out right. Right on.
There's a lawyer's manual.
And I hate to go back to the last charter, but in the last charter, we didn't talk about, in service areas, we didn't talk about powers, we talked about services.
That may be part of your problem.
It may well be.
But, I don't know.
What did you say?
People are more worried about power.
Service.
The increase or decrease of the powers, did that cover it or not?
Joe, read this.
Well, I'm not too happy with this, but you could say, should the municipality be able to perform additional powers upon a vote of the legislative body or upon prior approval of the voters to be served?
That idea, but immediately the interview is going to be asked, what powers do you have? We always get back around.
That's already easy to answer that, because you can explain.
Well, any power. Don't you just say any power?
Powers?
Yeah.
Another educating.
Any powers that are not presently there, if you want to extend
It's
them.
really a constitutional question.
Sure it is. It's a charter question we're talking about.
Yeah, it's central to the whole thing.
Jim was too in the legislature.
We were already talking about
that
services or anything.
question, talking about class borough.
How it's going to happen if it wants to.
That was the 64 session.
When the mandatory borough came in, the compromise really was that the second class borough could only go back and get additional powers by vote of the
Would the two of you be willing to sit down with me and
Oh, indeed.
find the question?
I'd go for that.
Okay,
I'd go for that.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Is that the sense of...
your call.
Question by Joseph and
Carlos.
As we go on here, in 56,
We never did. Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
I have a problem, or I have a question about 53, which is alternative number 1 requires reapportionment. And do we in any place in the questionnaire address whether or not we want to go through another reapportionment method?
We do right here. This is the question. This is the question.
Right here.
Okay, but I think...
And I think it's to be answered by the people, not by the charter commission.
I don't think anybody understands that they say, yeah, I want a single person district, but that means that we're going to have to figure out some way to reapportion the borough again.
All right, so what?
If they choose that,
We're setting
So
up...
what?
That's what we're talking about.
I thought that was the intent of that, was to show it as a sample when we first went into this. I didn't think, isn't that right, Mike? It was to be used as a sample, and it was a stop there. We were not going to conduct it.
Yeah, quite frankly,
It was up to the person. If they wanted an answer, fine. If they didn't,
Are you going to, was the intent to actually ask these questions in Mary's detail, or was the intent to just leave it?
The intent is to leave it, and the thing we're trying to find out is not how people feel about the answers that you're struggling over in terms of the questions, quite frankly. You may say, some may say biased, some may say inadequate, so on. It doesn't really bother me too much, because I'm more interested in whether people get into the process. If they don't like the way the questionnaire is written, they have room in there where they can get angry at her and write it in. And that's okay, because I'm not even terribly interested in finding out how they answer these questions. We're into the budget process, really. But rather, has she found with this kind of method something that will get a 10% response? If she has, then maybe you're into a significant form of people dealing with budget.
Yeah, I think the point here is that the charter would provide for the person voting to have an ability to respond to a questionnaire once a year. I think this is what we're trying to put across.
Well, proof that
And this would be a sample charter that would be, a sample questionnaire that would be used. And it would stop there. That's the impression I was under though.
Well, if you don't have it returned, you don't find out what sort of response you might get from it.
But I don't think we care about the response.
Well, I think we do.
Yeah.
But if you don't, why, that's another question. I think we do care about what proportion of response you might be able to get.
Here's another observation. We at this table don't understand what the hell's in here. We're asking the respondent to respond to something we don't even understand here.
Mr. Josephson?
You made the comment you didn't understand the question because you didn't understand the budgeting. Well, if you don't understand it, how is the respondent going to understand it?
I don't know if this is in order under Mrs. Sturczewski's motion, but I'm in this moment thinking this way, that I would like to see the questionnaire reworked. I think it still needs some reworking. I think Mrs. Holmes made a very good point that about I think this is what you're getting to. The possibility that local government officials might think that we are, raining on their parade by getting into issues that they will have to be dealing with. I'm wondering if we could have this, if it would serve Mrs. Froney's purpose, if we could rework the questionnaire, take it to the local officials, the mayors, the assembly people, and indicate that it's our intent to proceed with it in the second go-round to cover that problem or that protocol problem. Would that serve your purpose, Mr. Jones?
No, because I think you're getting onto what I'm talking about. But I'm more concerned not with what the local government officials will think, but what the people will think. But might I suggest a different alternative? Rework it, not as a document which would give Mary input for her budget, but as
as a sample, which is what we want. Say,
That's what
this
I
is
wanted, but I only have
sample.
one government that I know how to make a sample
Here
for.
are 2 sample questions on schools, 2 sample questions on general services. We would not purport to discuss all of the areas under each of the things, but give 1 or 2 examples for each major budget area, then say, if you were asked these questions in a larger questionnaire, would you respond? And have the people send it back. But not try and do the job that would be done under the unified government if this form were implemented, I guess is what I'm saying.
Ms. Parker?
Mr. Chairman, can I make an amendment to Mrs. Strzynski's motion that we at the same time modify the proposed questionnaire and cut it down in size and cut down the topics?
Is there a second to the amendment? Died for lack of a second. Mr. Joseph?
If you avoid the problem of questions that imply a position on the part of the commission, if you avoid the problem of irritating our relationship with the city and the borough, then for the reasons that Mr. Rome stated, why shorten the questionnaire? It seemed to me that's part of the experiment.
Let me ask.
I think that's one of the things that we want to find out. And I think if you can cover those points, that our identification with this kind of issue is a good thing for the commission to be identified with.
All right, let me ask a question. It's quite obvious I'm on the assembly. I don't think there's anybody in town that doesn't know it. I'm perfectly willing to be tarred with the brush. It can be said in the question that I have suggested that this might be something, or you can say that I would like to know, that I would be interested in their filling it out even in the present situation, something of this sort, so that it wasn't put on all of you, if that would solve the question.
It should not be connected to the assembly in any way or to you.
Mrs. Holmes?
Let me approach this from a different angle then. We, I think, have talked a lot about that we want a simple charter that's a framework for our local government. Okay? Do we see this particular thing being written specifically into the charter? If we don't see this as a particular thing to be written into the charter in detail, why are we spending our time and our money getting the answers to this question?
Because, Mr. Sheffield?
Well, I'll defer to Mr. Joseph, but I want to come back to the point that she made.
Mr. Josephson?
No, I think I can answer that. I think if a substantial number of these returns came in indicating that the overall concern was taxation, it would substantiate what Mrs. Coney reported to us as her impression of anxiety in the district that she represents, that unification may be perceived as a way by which government grows. And it would be something that we would want to address in the charter to make sure that we could cure that anxiety. That's what I think we would learn. We should answer with the second question there, wouldn't we?
But this specifically, I mean, do we really want to get into this kind of thing? I mean, can't we find that out and find out without getting into all of this?
Not behavioral concerns.
I don't think we belong in the behavioral arena. I guess
We're in
that's what
it.
I'm saying.
You're in it. You're in it up to your ears right now.
Mr. Sheffield?
Yeah, I don't know really how I feel on what I'm going to say.
It's been bothering me now, I guess, for a couple of weeks, but I think Mrs. Holmes touched on it. I don't know if she's down the same track I am or not, but one of the criticisms I heard on the last charter was that it was trying to be all things to all people. It was too much of it, and it got too cumbersome. I don't know, Dick might not agree with me on that, but because he's mumbling over here now, but I wonder if by sending out this particular questionnaire, and this might be what you were saying, is that do people get the idea right off the bat that we are attempting to do the same thing that maybe caused it to fail last time? And I may not be putting that across very well, but Frank Reed said one thing that the night that we met is that he would like to see this commission carry a very low profile and do our work and write the charter. And are we exposing ourselves to things that we don't know that much about and getting too involved with something that we wish down the road 2 months now we haven't got that involved? I have to think this out a little bit more, but it's been kind of worrying me all. I've been sitting here kind of mulling this over.
Could I address myself to that? Because I think Bill brings up a really good point, and I think in all fairness, I think I've probably given that why the last charter failed as much thought as anyone here, if not more. And Bill, I think Bill's got a handle on an important point, is that we did give, you might say, too many sops. We concerned ourselves a little too much with, we didn't appear strong on, particularly where the schools were concerned. And I think that did get us in trouble. Now, I'm not expressing it the same way you are, Bill, but I'm trying to elaborate on it, and I think it's an important point to bring up now. I think there is a problem there, and I think it was one of the major problems. And it's a kind of a thing I'd like to get a better handle on with this survey. And I think this is why we're here and what we're trying to do.
I would think that we might do something like this in a second go around after we've all had a chance to think it over a little bit more. If we do as Arla suggests in her motion and ask the general questions now, we still have the option of going back the second time around with this particular thing and finding out that answer. I don't think it may be critical to the local government to have the answers to this now for their budget making process, but it's not critical to us at this point in our procedure. So I would speak in favor of Arla's motion and
hold on, Mr. Chairman, a question of, yes, Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
I wondered if you could repeat the motion.
Yes, it was to reword questions 57 and 58, basically so they could stand alone, that they would request their ideas about budget priorities through a questionnaire. In other words, to make it general, so it would not be accompanied by a specific questionnaire, but to leave the questions in.
So, we should have an objection to, we left general questions in, we found some positive response, and we would agree on a questionnaire. The second time we go back, perhaps find if we have a better consensus.
Mr. Chairman, I definitely think that might be a possibility. I think my concern is looking at this, and I'm sensitive, not city or borough, but sensitive to the impact it might have. It is very obviously, knowing what I know about government services, one that is oriented to the specific borough process. And there are some very real questions. We're going to get into the whole thing of service areas, possibly extension of powers into port, into the Fine Arts Museum, and a number of really naughty questions that perhaps we would want to get incorporated in a full questionnaire.
All right,
Okay.
I will accept that. Would there be any objection if this sort of a questionnaire is used by the borough in the meantime? If we don't have answers in the local government, if we don't have answers in the local government shortly, this borough is going to be in trouble, and I feel we've got to have some of these. Now, my object in wanting it to go out with the other is that I hate to have the borough to have the expense of going through the selection process of a random selection. And the only way that I can get it out to a number that won't be selective is through a random selection.
Sure, there are some manual changes to.
Well, don't we let ourselves open criticism by using the Charter Commission for the...
I accept that. I accept Arliss's objections. I'm perfectly willing to have those two questions reworded, and I will try to use this specific questionnaire as a borough questionnaire in the meantime, and then we can write a general questionnaire that would hit both borough and city in this general line that would be more suitable for the Charter Commission to send out. I accept that. There would be more suitable. The only reason it was written this way is because I didn't have the help of somebody from the city to help me do it.
Call for the question.
Question's been called for. All those in favor of the question?
Aye.
Those opposed?
It just takes a little longer sometimes.
And then
I'm going to sit here and pout.
No, but I mean, we have to have it out. That's the way.
I'm not the one who's saying anything.
we might be able to let Mrs. Rowland go, and Mrs. Rowland go. See,
She has a question, I believe.
This may sound like a very minor question, but I'm still confused with the way we do in the field. Who gives the final okay?
That's a good question.
I thought you...
okay, you mean on the questions? I believe that the commission has given you the sense, and I think the committee should review for the final okay. And I think, if I am correct, the sense of the commission is to let the committee make the final decision. Mr. Parsons and with the help of Mr. Josephson, I believe this was earlier suggested, along with the rest of the committee.
Mr. Chairman, if we have any doubt in our mind, we'll bring it to the full group one way or another before we go out.
Thank you. Mr. Parsons is chairman of that committee.
I'll call you in the morning.
Okay. We go on, ask for chairman of the Charter Production Committee, Mr. Fisher, to carry us forward. Need him jump on. I noticed I had one.
Mrs. Strzalewski, Mr. Parker, Joseph and I met today and discussed charter production, and we need more of a sense of the commission, I believe, as to what the Charter Production Committee is going to do. As a suggestion, we first view the job of the Charter Production Committee as not that of course, any final approval, and feel that the commission as a whole has to approve every word in this charter. Further, that we do not particularly view the Charter Production Committee's function as one of recommending anything to the commission except alternatives on any substantive issue. that's a crucial point. The commission may want the Charter Production Committee to recommend specific things on, for instance, a apportionment plan or a type of executive. We didn't feel that that would properly be our function, but rather bring the alternatives to the commission as a whole. Further, we felt that we would start, in fact, from as a basis from the last charter that was produced, mostly because it's just convenient. And lastly, we would like the attorney, please, Rick, to prepare for us for all the commission, a synopsis of Title 29, showing what limitations there are, what limitations we have on specific issues. Again, as a convenience, and gear it to the last charter. Did I fairly report the sense of the committee today?
I think, Mr. Chairman, what we would like to have known is this. To what extent is the discretion or latitude of the commission fettered or restricted by state law and state constitution?
Okay.
And we'd like to have that organized by the attorneys so that when we reach an issue that we could debate, except that if we're powerless to do anything about it, we know that we can go on to other questions.
Does that make sense, Mr. Garnett?
Yes, I think so.
I mean,
for example, Rick, in the charter, in the last charter that would be used as the markup document, you could indicate those provisions which might no longer be consistent with state law because of changes since then, or those provisions which must be either explicitly stated in the charter or referenced to prevailing provisions of state law and implicitly contained in the charter.
Yeah, I think that's an analysis really of the laundry list in Title 29, which refers to those parts of Title 29 which specifically limit home rule municipalities. And of course, there's another whole dimension to this question of the limitations on us, and that is what the Supreme Court has said about implicit conflicts between state policies or state statutory schemes and what a home rule municipality might do. So I have an outline of those cases. I'll work that in.
Mr. Chairman, would it be fair to ask you, Rick, does that create an intolerable task? Is it is it not intolerable, but is it a very large task? Would we be better, perhaps, to ask that of you in context with specific areas as we go through? I don't have any idea in my mind, hey, have we given you 5,000 hours?
No, Mr. Jaluska, I think sort of a combination of both would work. I can certainly go through the laundry list in Title 29 and amplify it so as to explain the specific parts of Title 29 which limit us. That's not a big problem. I can also summarize the cases with a view to giving the Commission some feeling for the way the courts analyze potential conflicts between state legislative schemes and what we might do. I think in addition to that, the OSCOT won't have omniscience and other things will come up, specific things as to whether I think in light of the court's principles a particular thing is likely to be held.
Can you prepare a key to the charter saying required by such and such statute or barred
are prohibited.
Key to the last charter, so that, when we're discussing something here, we know what the range of alternatives are according to law. That's kind of what we're after, so we can address ourselves. All right.
Shall we suggest that this be done in a particular order so that we can
That's really why we're using the last charter, so we've got an
No,
order.
but I mean, more importantly, it may be as to what we saw the next step.
Okay, and then, let me go on. As part of our recommendation as to the way we should approach this, we agree that the subcommittee agreed that there are a number of issues that we should solve or we should come to a decision on philosophically. And that we really don't know how many there are, but perhaps a dozen or 18 issues within the total charter that have to be philosophically dealt with. A minor one of those we view as minor but important is the name, for instance. And this would be our recommendation that the first issue would be discussed, of course, after the first round of public hearings. What will we name the new government? That is an issue. And I'm trying to give examples now. The next item that is an issue is how the assembly will be made up. What will be its structure? That is a major issue that we think we've got to resolve before we can go back to the attorney and say, this is what we want, now you come back with the wording and we'll approve it. Going on, perhaps the next issue is whether or not we want an ombudsman. That would be. And this is kind of the way we envisioned our role, and this is what the committee wants from the commission as a whole, to see if we're heading in the right direction. As far as can help.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just one thing, and really in response to Sherry, we felt that at the next meeting it would be appropriate for us to sit down, take a look at what we must accomplish in the time that we have time frame, and make recommendations, and maybe we'll have to change a bit our priorities, but schedule ahead that on X night we will discuss certain portions of the charter so that we can, and that's what I was talking about in terms of where priorities might be. And it'll have a twofold thing. It'll give us a sense of how to get down on Fred's workflow chart to accomplish the task, but it will also allow us for, we feel it's very important that the public be notified through the media of when we're going to discuss whether it's education or planning or whatever, so that there could be an opportunity for them to make an appearance request, be here to give us input before we get into the type of discussions we have. Does that...
Mr. Chairman, just by way of clarifying again the type of analysis that the committee might want legally, I wonder, since we have talked at least generally about having the charter be as concise as possible, if the subcommittee is interested in some sort of analysis as to what portions of the former charter are necessary, or put another way, unnecessary. If we can take a second and say, this could be done by legislation.
This is the next step. This would be the next step in the process. We feel the first step is to make these philosophical decisions. And then the next step is the actual writing, which I think, again, this commission ought to approve word by word. And that's where we should have that input very definitely.
Well, Mr. Chairman, possibly he can do that at the same time. But that saves him as a technique. Yes, we do need that information.
Mr. Chairman, Rick, how long do you envision? I have absolutely no idea. Do you think that this is going to take you 1 week, 3 weeks, a month, 2 days?
Well, the efficiency increases to accommodate time available. The some extent. Certainly I can have something ready as of whenever the subcommittee gets together. It's just a matter of how elaborate.
Well, this is, I guess what I'm getting at is if we decide to go through the document in a certain order, can you be going through the document just ahead of us so that we have feedback
One
from you?
paragraph ahead of the class, that's my...
Right. I mean, rather than our waiting for your entire report, can you feed us bits and pieces of it?
And I think that's a better idea, really, because it gives me an opportunity to go in more depth.
That's what we anticipate.
All right. Have we got the sense of your report now?
Yeah, now we need some feedback. Is that what we want to do? Is that what we're to do? Is that what we are to do?
Is that the sense of the commission?
They're probably so confused they wouldn't dare say no.
Well, we figured that you folks were going to come up with what parts you were going to recommend of the old charter that we should use, and what parts we want to use as a model, and what parts we want to might leave out or had to leave in, this sort of thing.
I think that I'd like to amplify one thing Dick said. It's essential that the charter be the product of 11 people. And therefore, we concluded that we should not come in with a recommended article from the subcommittee to the commission kind of thing. That our purpose should be to crystallize the issues. For example, the mayor thing to review the various alternatives and maybe so that whatever the pleasure of the body is can be easily arrived at. Now there may be some questions of such complexity that you would want the committee, Mr. Chairman, to do a special study and come in with a recommendation. And we didn't mean to preclude that, but we, as a general proposition, just wanted to come in with the alternatives.
As a suggestion, why not have, so that each commissioner is participating, why not take the old charter, have each commissioner review it, and indicate those parts that he feels are usable in this charter. Then the subcommittee can take all these 11 inputs, screen them down, and arrive at a common one, put those to one side, and then your issues will fall out automatically at that point.
Very important.
Why can't we do that? Then you're having the input from the 11 commissioners, and the committee is acting as it should, as a steering mechanism.
Mr. Chairman, may I suggest that that's a really neat idea, that be one of the things that the committee discusses as to a timetable so that we can come back to the full commission and recommend when we would need that information. In other words, we tie that kind of thing into perhaps the timetable that we will be following on general discussion. It could be quite a burdensome thing to do the whole thing, but that's a great idea.
But it gives you the skeleton right away of your basic charter, and then you can plug in as you go along.
Well, let's structure that right now, and let's get copies. Well, everyone has a copy.
Everyone has a copy.
So if you could, let's get additional copies, Mr. Chairman, if we can get additional copies of the old charter at the next meeting, then everyone will have a clean copy, and they can give the committee a copy that they have scribbled upon. So let's do that. Huh?
So this week, people can begin scribbling on the copy
They
they
can go through the
have,
charter, correct.
knowing that they'll get a clean one to keep next week.
Right.
I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, in line with what Dick said, I think the way you had it set up last time was pretty neat, with everybody apparently got a book of this sort with the articles labeled and basically loosely, and you started with a certain version, and as successive versions of the particular article emerged, they were added, and you could tell where you'd been, where it would require that we ask an MTSD to have an MPSD, and I don't think there'd be any problem getting that.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, not to belabor it, but I think one point that was made, and we didn't get into a great deal of discussion, but one thing you might want to be aware of on the transitional details.
I was going to bring up.
Oh, how about that? We had a little bit of problem at this point trying to decide whether we truly needed two committees. If we do need two committees, they're going to have to work really pretty closely together, so you need to think of that, because you don't talk in terms of the charter and the transition really as two separate things. There may be a thing of, say, liaison with this group of people that's working and so on that calls for it to be a separate group, but I'm a little concerned that we might get, unilateral action when really it's all one thing.
I see your point. I do feel, though, that the transition is one of the most vital things.
I agree.
The details of how you transfer the governmental powers, how you function, which is a self-executing and ends and is out of the charter. And that is, to me, probably the most vital part of the charter. I really feel it's going to take the input from everybody.
Maybe having Dick as, on both of them, that's where you'll get it. But I think we'll have to watch for a problem that may develop, that we are not sitting down at the committee level working on the charter production and the transitional details. That's the only thing, just a note of concern.
Anything further on charter production? No. I'll go on to public information, and I'll just tell you that we have public hearings scheduled for the 19th and the 20th. Lisa got the ads in, and we have gotten the chorus room at East High, which is not a great big room, and room G2A service hand shoe, but it's not a big room.
7:38.
7:30. And the 26th and the 27th, I was able to schedule get a schedule on the council chambers for the 26th. And you'll note on the agenda I've listed Northern Lights School. Since that time, that was a very, very small room, and we went to Northwood School and got a double-sized room, rooms 1 and 2 at Northwood School. And
Do we get to sit in little chairs?
Yes, kindergarten chairs.
Those are little kids.
This covers each one of the areas. Northwood School is in Area 3, H, G, and H of the Assembly, and East High is in Area 2, City, Muldoon. Council Chambers, of course, Area 1, and Service Hand Shoe in Area 4. It's off a little bit to the side on that. That area encompasses also Sand Lake, and perhaps if we, in our second set of hearings, we ought to have that Diamond Mirrors.
Very
Yes, very good spread in that area.
big area.
I made the budget, I made the budget presentation to the Assembly on the 10th, Monday night. It was, I had heard earlier about possible change in the price structure, and I felt so that we could cover that for whatever we did here tonight, I should increase that. I tried to reach Mr. Fisher, and it was 5:30, and we just couldn't connect between then and Assembly time, so I raised that budget by $10,000 up from 20 to 30,000, knowing in any case if we're not going to need it, we're not going to spend it. And I took that budget into the assembly Monday night, total amount of $55,000. The assembly approved it. Some very good comments and some no nitpicking on it as far as the assembly was concerned. I was very pleased with the reception I got. I had not put myself on the agenda to have it heard. When I came in, I distributed the budget document and told them that I would wait until time, and they put me on in persons to be heard early in the evening and allowed me to get home early, and I really appreciate it. So that'll cover what we have in the way of public information. There's been a couple of small releases at time and places. Mr. Fisher?
You asked the last meeting that the subcommittee on budget prepare a budget from June 30th, September 1st. I've done that, presented it tonight in a slightly amended form because the rest of the committee pointed out an error. Sheffield. And I'll certainly have it typed, retyped, but this is the committee's recommendation. If we want to go into that, I noticed you didn't have it on the agenda, so
I figured that under unfinished business.
Okay, so that's appropriate then.
Appropriate place and time.
In the matter of the public hearing, what steps will be taken to advertise those hearings?
Public hearings have been advertised. Lisa has gotten the ad in the first.
They will appear on Saturday and they'll run through Wednesday. And they'll be in the morning and the evening paper, you can call radio stations if you want to. I'm not sure.
Just 1 minute, and I'll show you the brief of the ad.
It'll probably be 3 by 8.
That's the actual size.
That's how big it is?
Oh, that's just in handwriting, you know.
But it'll be.
I mean, is it a full, like?
No, this is the black outline.
That is the size.
This size.
It's hand printed rather than printed by the machine, but it's the size.
This is what it was took over for them to prepare from, to work from.
Too late to make them any bigger?
Well, I would like us to call the radio stations too to get it on the public service announcements. It's a good idea. It'd be on 3-4 times a day, and TV, you know.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Jones, I just have this to say. As I look at that, it's entitled Notice of Public Hearing, and cites the Alaska statute which says that we're required to hold public hearings. It doesn't sound like we're really awful eager and happy about getting into it. And I'd like to have a radio approach that maybe points out that we really are looking for the advice rather than saying that pursuant to such and such a section of the statute we are compelled to hold the hearing.
Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, I was looking at one last Sunday. I was looking at the proposed deal that the management committee put out, and they had on that they wanted to advertise the hearing starting on the 14th. And the first one would be on the 19th. I'm looking at the time schedule for the newspaper. They had to have it by 4 o'clock on Monday. And nobody knew this, and so I called Mr. Shaw and yourself and informed you that they did have to have it.
We'll approve the next one.
And the next one has to be in by 4 p.m. Monday the 17th.
You're right, there's a
Suggestion, following what Joseph's saying, to put a personal touch to it. Why not have each commissioner cut a small tape? Can we get public service time and that commissioner make an appeal we can run it over and over. I mean, each 11 of us in the field, please come. I'd like to hear what you have to say about the charter and whatnot. Bring it down home and get away from a fall type thing. Why not do that?
That's the kind of thing we want. We really want the people.
And I think we can work with the media and get that kind of cooperation from them.
Should that committee meet, I wonder?
As far as that is concerned, why doesn't the publication committee take that matter up of the ad as soon as possible and say, instead of notice of public hearing, public hearing, you know, really get it on?
I don't know, but I don't believe that there's any possibility of changing this now.
No, what's that?
Well, we've got another one next week.
Let's do the...
Let's run some radio time.
And I'll look into the radio time and I'll contact you individually, or if we can get this put together properly, we'll do it.
Are we still going to go through with the idea of having at least kind of a small hearing in Girdwood for the people down there, Potter and Indian? A couple of us had said we'd volunteer to go down.
At this juncture, nothing is scheduled. I think it's an excellent idea to go down and have a hearing down there sometime within the next 30 days. Jane?
Mr. Chairman, I'm real concerned about establishing a format for our public hearings, and what are we going to do so that once we've advertised, if we've got people coming and how are we going to proceed once we set up what's the format going to be?
Format of the hearing.
Yeah.
My feeling on it, and I'm open to any suggestion, is that we as the commission are there to hear what is, and not to get into an argument with people, but to hear what they have to present. I think depending upon the number of people that attend the hearing, chair should limit the amount of time for each person, and if that is not adequate time for the person to expand on what they have to say, to request that they give it to us in writing. And so if there's one party there, I'm going to listen all night.
One suggestion that I'd like to make is that since there are 11 of us, it might be worth trying to break any group that we encounter into smaller groups and have an exchange, a discussion with individuals, assuming that we would have a method of maintaining an accurate record of the comments of the individuals, so that people, first place, don't have to sit there all night and listen to one person after another, and that the individuals would actually be in a dialogue with the commissioners as opposed to just listening.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't think there are going to be that many people show up. I hope there are, but and then maybe there are. Maybe I'm dead wrong, but it seems to me, my experience is that there aren't going to be. And it seems to me that, first of all, we don't want to limit the discussion and don't want to infer in any way that there's a time limit on the discussion unless we all of a sudden see 100 people there, and it's pretty obvious that, but please, let's not even mention it. I mean, if there are 10, 15 people there,
not that detailed, but something to have there for those who wish to make comments but don't like to stand up or sit in front of a group and talk out loud, and who might not take the time to sit down and write out their thoughts, but something for them to react to give us input that we might not get otherwise.
Rather than ask them things, maybe just have the paper available there for them to make their comments and submit.
Well, I'm concerned that people might not think to comment on something, that if they had something on the idea of this that they could react to, they might give us some input on.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think there would be any objection to having additional copies of this questionnaire that's used for the survey present that they could answer and fill out if they wish to.
I don't know, something we'd have to talk to.
I think there is.
You think there is?
These are handled by the surveyor who's a qualified interviewer, and they're not handed to the people to fill out. I think it needs to be of a different form. It also has a tendency to dilute your sampling technique to some degree.
We could perhaps set out, we've mentioned the 5 or rather 10 or 12 basic philosophy questions. And maybe we could just have a sheet that says, please set out any thoughts you have about, and list them.
Head of local government?
I definitely think you're right.
Districting?
Have something.
Service areas? You mean that sort of question?
Yeah, something
Just
broad.
list the subject matter, not
Just list suggestions at the top of a page that people might comment on, just to get their wheels turning. So
Maybe an area on apportionment, type of leader, a few general.
Maybe it should be done through Rowan so that it works into his overall.
Right.
There must be a systematic, there must be some scientific about how he does it and what he does.
We're in a behavioral business, remember that.
You hope three, I think. I would hope Joe, that we're
And people might not, for instance, wish to comment on any of those. They might want to comment on only 1 or 2, not a multiple question, fill in every blank kind of thing.
The other good point of that is being it's available, people will pick it up and notice it, and it kind of gives them an outline, and it'll conjure in their mind certain questions they didn't think about.
And things maybe that they would speak to when they were
Mr. Chairman, since the hour fidgets, I would move that we refer the items brought forth in this general discussion as to the format of the hearing, to the information that might be gotten in addition to the public hearing, to the public information committee, and suggest that they would be empowered to handle these matters, bring them to us for use at the Wednesday meeting.
Second.
Thereabouts.
Question. Moved and seconded. Question's been called for.
Nobody has enough work to do, so give it
Is
to
there
us.
any, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? So ordered.
Didn't have license.
When will we meet?
Now, we do have the,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
when will we meet?
I would think that if it's all right with you. How hard it is to get hold of each other. That Friday afternoon would be
Oh dear, I have appointments tomorrow afternoon.
Friday.
It's tomorrow, Friday.
Tomorrow is.
It darn well is, and I've got appointments tomorrow afternoon.
Well, would
Tomorrow morning I'd meet with you.
tomorrow morning's all right with me.
Going to hell. Tomorrow's a money maker.
Tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow you can.
Oh, it doesn't matter, I'm not on the committee. I'm seeing.
Tomorrow morning's all right.
I'm seeing patients for money tomorrow.
All right, I misheard the committee. I misheard the committee. Which committee is it working on?
Public information.
Oh, you're right, I'm not on it. You're safe. Good. Good. Oh, Mary. Good.
That's tomorrow morning, 5, Marker, 30 with D.M. Fisher.
I have a real conflict with tomorrow during the day, and my preference is, if possible, we could meet on Monday because of my schedule, and I really do want to be part of the decisions on this one.
What time Monday would be convenient for you?
How about 11:30?
11:30.
11:30.
Is that a lunch meeting?
So you gonna have lunch or what?
Yep.
You wanna have it at lunch?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, I'd ask you to remove from that committee because it's kind of large and
Okay. Where do we meet Monday?
Well, Mr. Chairman? Yeah. I don't know how we got sidetracked, but I was presenting the budget. I need approval of
We
that.
haven't finished our meeting yet.
Oh,
where?
sorry.
7,000 fine with me. That's all right with you folks.
We're gonna get to know the menu. Very well.
Better write a new one down. New menu.
Or get a new Coke.
Okay, 11:30.
Yeah, I'm tired of their food. Your house? But I'm not eating there. The restaurant's much better.
That's something that we want to run through in the lunch hour.
That is lunch hour. Yeah. 11:30 to like 1:30. That's easier for me.
Cocktails at 2.
I'll be there if I can.
Mr. Chairman, could we, I suspect we
Chairman,
should...
I move that we accept this budget as proposed by the budget committee.
Second.
Motion, is there a second?
Do we have copies of this? No. Ms. Parsons, you may not have gotten one. I didn't have quite enough copies. Can you share with...
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
I see one problem here, and I suspect it falls on the hands of the Public Information Committee, and that is in the area of printing and publishing. I think that needs a great deal of discussion as to how we are going to actually present this charter to the public, and perhaps, are we going to use newspaper prints, or are we going to attempt a mailing? I think perhaps we need to be a little more specific in that, and I'm a little bit nervous because I think that's the key thing to get this information into the hands of John Q. And maybe, 5,000 is a neat figure, but is it enough?
Well, Mr. Chairman, in that regard, there's a couple of things that you said. One is that in our committee meeting this morning, although it really wasn't part of germane to our function, it was mentioned that one possibility is actually reproducing a charter for every household and either a newsprint or some other method, so that each voter could refer to it. I don't know if the $5,000 item is adequate. Otherwise, I think this budget, Mr. Fisher, because it may be questioned why we would change so rapidly on it, is really a projection of the rate of expenditure for salaries and so forth. That's all committed.
Yeah.
There's no new policy coming across.
I might indicate that this is the manner in which last charter was presented to the public as a pillar in the papers, and I think that one excellent means of getting it in all the households.
Was that a public service in the paper, or did you have to pay for it too? We had to pay for it, I think.
Well, that still is only a couple of pages.
That was a concern of mine too, and it is really a policy decision of this body as to what we should do in that regard. And, I have a pretty firm feeling that we not pay, Charter Commission not pay for any advertising. I don't think we should use public funds for that. I think it's appropriate, however, Ms. Joseph's suggestion is very appropriate, that we mail out charters. I don't think that comes in the nature
publication. So, that's my feeling, and that's what kind of what this was based upon, although I didn't really think about, in fact, I didn't think at all about mailing out charters. In light of that, perhaps we could make the contingency here a little bit larger and put it back up to 35,000, increase the contingency another $3,500. I mean, that would tend to cover it.
The newspapers won't publish it as a...
I wouldn't think so.
So,
Which would make that item,
only a couple of full pages.
Why do you know we shouldn't advertise?
By that.
well, I just have pretty firm feelings about the not using public money to advertise things. That's happened to be my
Yeah, we
philosophy.
use it for everything else.
So we shouldn't advertise a public hearing.
No, advertising, our public hearings know the matter. That's strictly the nature of information for them, and sending out a charter would be the nature of information. This advertising or promoting it is another,
This point is the most important point in this whole process. Is letting the public see this thing. It's more important than the survey and everything else. And this should really have a lot of attention, because this is the only way the public's going to get to know what they're going to be talking about.
I don't know if there's any money in this budget for the campaigning, for the advertising campaign. I don't know. Dick and I didn't really discuss this all that much. I don't feel there's any money in here for campaign purposes. I think that's probably a supplemental. This might cost $15,000-$20,000 to put on a campaign. Now, I don't know if we know that right now. I don't know if we can tell you that. Or when we're going to get it. That may be 2 months from now that we know this, and maybe there was private funds available. The city and the borough are going to kick in some money. I don't.
Private funds, city and borough. Now, what are you talking?
Well, I think there's private funds and city and borough money going to be put in this.
Well, certainly,
When they want to pass a bond issue, they certainly buy the radio time and the TV spot. That's not private money.
we want to plan for it.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we refer the budget, in particular the item of the printing and publishing, to the Public Information Committee for a recommendation and report back at the next meeting. Mr. Chairman, this would have effect of holding off approving of the budget, but I really think it is a decision we need to look at and then have that before we go on to the Borough Assembly, because I think the possibility of a supplemental or contingency budget is, we better know what we're talking about now.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any problem with that, and we would have done that originally if. My understanding is you needed this resolution.
Mary suggested that we get it as soon as we possibly.
Is that going to be true?
But next week is fine.
Next week is still within the budget process time.
Good.
In fact, 2 weeks from now, still within the budgetary process time, but we're getting down for a deadline.
Okay.
Jane?
Mr. Chairman, are we going to have a business meeting next week? Since we're having a public hearing on Thursday?
There's a motion on the table.
The motion to refer the budget to the Public Information Committee for input and recommendation back to the next meeting. Question's been called for. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Sure. Jane, in answer to your question, we've got a public hearing both the 19th and the 20th. And then we have them scheduled for the 26th and the 27th. Somewhere along here we should have a regular business meeting. I think probably after the first two public hearings. the one problem, part of the following week would be difficult or impossible for Mr. Joseph.
About Friday.
How about Friday, Mary?
Mr. Chairman, that would be fine with me. I don't want to inconvenience anyone else, but it might be possible that if the public hearing
Right.
did not go on, say, beyond 9 or 9:30, even 10 o'clock, we could have a short business meeting thereafter. And I would propose to do that in these cases so that we make maximum use of the evening.
That's a consensus of the commission. I'll try to handle it in that fashion.
Fine, just schedule it as an agenda item. If we can't consider it, we can put it off as unfinished business on next.
Fair enough. I just sat back and relaxed as the thought for a moment of leave was over.
Isn't it?
I see there's any other unfinished business come before the meeting? Sherry?
I think that I would like to try and get an idea of when our committee,
Charter production.
charter production.
Probably is.
My schedule is very flexible. When would the committee members like to meet?
Well, we scheduled it for today at noon because of Joe's problems, mostly.
Schedule it for today at
Thursday.
would you like Thursday noon next week? That's the idea.
I can't make it, okay, sorry.
When
Friday noon. Wednesday noon. Friday noon.
you make it Wednesday noon? When two of our members can't make next Thursday, so when would be?
Police, you can't make it?
I do those classes.
Would Friday be too late?
No, I don't think so.
Friday?
Okay,
Where?
That's tomorrow, Sherry.
No, next year. I mean.
are you
Chairman, can we wait
thinking
till a week
of
from Friday?
tomorrow or next Friday? A week from, all right, that's,
Joe, sure, he's talking.
you're speaking of a week from tomorrow, not tomorrow.
And where?
I'm in favor of packed lunches rather than go out lunching all the time. You can meet at my house if you'd like, or we can meet downtown.
Who's gonna make my sack lunch?
You.
I'll make sausage for hiring trees.
Perhaps by that time we may have it all.
Where does this fit in the production schedule? Fine.
Can Mrs. Holmes notify us of the suitable
I will
place
notify
downtown?
you of a suitable place downtown.
Hey, I've got it. Actually, Sherry, why don't we meet in my office?
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got a super.
Okay, where?
No problem. I was just going to show you that if you're going to have the next meeting of the Charter Production Committee, then somebody could let me know generally what the committee proposes to take up by way of subject matter, so I can have something ready on those points.
In Conway, I hope.
Yeah.
Have lunch with us.
Okay, let's meet at 6 office, and is that agreeable to everyone? And where is your office?
750 West 2nd Avenue, Suite 201. If I could, Mr. Garnett or Rick, I don't mean to be interfering with Sherry's business, but we did carry this forward without her. And
Thank you.
And I want to suggest what we're going to do at the next meeting is to talk about issues, specifically which issues that the committee is going to recommend to the commission as a whole to be brought up, and the timing, the sequence of those issues.
sequence of the charter, I thought, Dick.
Yeah, really,
Right.
there'll be, but there might be some variance in that. But
Yeah.
that's specifically what's to be discussed, and I would think at the next meeting.
Okay, well, all right, that's fine. I would propose necessarily to have a super detailed analysis in a particular section at that point. We can talk generally about parameters and so forth.
Unfortunately, this is the one committee that does have a little lead time because of the public hearings.
Noon.
Ms. Parker?
Oh, do you? Then I owe you a copy from last week, if you're keeping track.
The cost of the TV stations and the radio.
Sorry, I don't hear you.
The cost of the TV stations and the radio stations about public hearings, who's gonna make them?
That's what we're gonna meet on, the public information.
On Monday? Too late. That'd be is public hearings on Wednesday.
You better get together tomorrow, she's got a good one.
Couldn't that be done prior to our setting the whole format?
Hey,
I thought Frank indicated he was going to call.
I
He did.
will call.
Don't worry about it.
well, if we're gonna do any tape, someone has to get it together. Yeah, well, that's the point, if we're gonna tape, we've gotta...
I'll try to get some information tomorrow, and I'll try to get back to you guys tomorrow.
Give me a shot, I'll be available in the morning.
May have to have a meeting or something.
You won't catch me.
I'll try to get you information tomorrow.
I'll catch you.
I have one other question. The pre-poll on the 18th of March, what is it?
That's the one where we're going to
We're
work.
trying to get this poll out in the next few days so that we can get it back quick. That's this one, we're trying to get underway this week, get back by the end of next week.
$90,000 poll that we're gonna
And Mr. Chairman, in that light, could I ask the members of the Public Opinion Research Committee, Mrs. Froney, Ms. Anrick, and Mrs. Holmes, when we'd like to meet?
It'll have to be tomorrow, it looks to me like.
Now, they're gonna have a little time.
I can meet tomorrow night.
Actual
You and your damn workload, Sharon, Chris.
About 20 hours a week.
Well, I can meet tomorrow night, or I can meet tomorrow morning. Make your choice.
What are your Saturday morning,
Saturday I can't.
Saturday morning, 10.
I can meet anytime tomorrow.
I think they need a little time to get it back
I
together.
think probably to do.
I can meet on Sunday. Sunday is Sacred Cow.
Well, let me call them in the morning and see what they propose. Is that you can, when's tomorrow, if they say tomorrow? You cannot meet tomorrow.
I can't, but that's right.
Can or cannot?
I am not available during the workday tomorrow.
What about tomorrow night?
No, not tomorrow night. How about 5 o'clock?
There goes your date.
5 o'clock tomorrow, okay.
I won't be back until about
But I...
6:30 for my appointment.
And Saturday's out.
Saturday I will be done. How
And,
about tomorrow at 5 o'clock at the restaurant? I'll be the one hanging under the bar stool.
I just got through saying I cannot get there
Oh,
at
I'm
5
sorry.
o'clock. I cannot get there before 6:30. I can at 6:30 on.
Sunday?
From 6:30
How
on
about
tomorrow.
Sunday?
Sunday evening?
Sunday afternoon?
I'm gonna ski come hell or high water this weekend.
Late afternoon?
We don't close till 5.
We're skiing this weekend.
Mr. Chairman?
Why don't the members of that, I'm giving a suggestion, members of that committee appoint the chairman as a committee of one to approve it, because there wasn't that much to do
All
anyway.
right, 6:30 is one possibility tomorrow night, but not before evidently for all of us. And the next time we all can get together, we're talking about is sometime late Sunday, right?
I can do it at 6:30 tomorrow night.
I'll ask in the morning and call you all.
From 6:30 on, I can do it, but not before.
Thank you.
Can we get on, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, can we get on?
Yeah, can we get on?
Now that we took care of our report. Thank you.
Is there any other unfinished business?
It's gonna be Sunday night.
Any new business?
Don't worry about
Okay.
it.
All right. Let's
Do we
get
have any persons in the audience who are not on the agenda that would like to be heard? I see Mr. and Mrs. Whitson with us. Ms. Lawson.
I asked a question.
Yeah.
I'd like to clarify, in the protocol, we're invited to the subcommittee meeting. What was that?
Meetings of which our commission are open. As far as subcommittee meetings, I assume that the desire to be done, they
Sure.
And
Not hidden.
we have Mr. Martin with us. Is that your son with you?
No. His name is Tom Kelly. I'm John Wood. I like to sound more but I believe that very definitely no public funds should be used to advertise in favor of the charter. It should be an unbiased presentation to the public. And just because it has been used, the public funds have been used in favor of borough sewer bond issues and so on in the past, that certainly doesn't justify it in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. We also have a man who's been spent a great deal of time on unification one way and another over a period of years. Noah Keller. Appreciate your coming. Have you any comment?
One, just briefly, on this question of this community call-in, I talked to the Gary Holthouse at the last minute this morning about it on another topic, but the same concept. That you probably should be very skeptical, I think, of getting involved in that because of the fact there's no way to control who's doing the calling in and no way to validate that you're getting any valid demographic sample. We got involved, or the Committee for Unification, just before the election with a radio talk show KFUD has where you call in, and the question was, are you in favor of unification? This was 1 week before the election. And the vote was 8-6 against unification. And so you're giving a vocal minority a great opportunity to call in and just wipe out your statistical sample on a blind call.
That's a good point, Noah.
Yeah, when he presented it, I got the feeling that they measured the drain against the line or something like this, and that I could dial in and get drained once, and dial in again and get drained again, and as quick as I could dial and get that busy signal, I'd be measured against that line. And I would alert my friends. Hey, they're doing a straw poll on X candidate. Call in, quick. As many times as you can get on the phone.
We're real pleased also to see Ryan's representative, Mr. Smith. And,
Keep me straight. Keep me straight.
well, that's just, we can see that. I think everybody in the audience is here and spending time, and we appreciate their being here. And if any time along the way you feel that you have something to put in, don't hesitate to say so. We may not pay attention, but don't hesitate to say so.
Mr. Chairman, there's a place here for commissioners' comments. I would like to make one other question. When we were talking about my poll, could it be presented in this manner, to have the complete poll that for the Charter Commission presented, make a statement to the effect that the that the costs of the Charter Commission are paid for by the Borough Assembly. The Borough Assembly is in the budget process, and if you would like to answer this questionnaire for them, I would leave it with you.
No, I think not, Mayor.
All right.
I mean, I'll be willing to discuss it.
Incidentally, for further information, Mr. King did send us some information that arrived today.
Good.
Public management.
Good.
And for all the commissioners, I'm sorry, I left one person out who was here tonight that's going to have much to do with it, but anyway, that's Vicki Almeida. Vicki privately lives in Washington City and kind enough to work for us.
Oh, that's great.
Just barely back.
Barely back, you're right.
What was